I will block you. Don't bother. And they were like, blah, 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 and I was like, block. And I said, big capital letters, block. Block, block. Yeah, you keep talking. Block. You ever done that before? You're fuck you. You're not cool. Fuck you. Peace. Right? And block. All 13 of them. Got through all 13 of them. I was like, thanks for inviting me to your fucking worthless shithead cocksucking fucking fleet for losers. You fucking shitheads. Go to nullsec and pull your fucking pussy ass skirts down. You fucking bitches. And I left, you know, and I couldn't believe it. Now that's the Grover moment where you just you burn the bridges of any of the dudes who have ever built a house out there, and you're not asking them how to fly a fleet or how to survive a gank or any of this stuff. It doesn't matter what they say or do. They're just the public at large, you know. So you can ask them for advice on how to build the house and maybe get out of less of a disaster, get less of a disaster out of it. But I mean, in the end, you could just also block them. They're the public at large. You don't need them. You're building the house, right? You're building the house.
Teaching
and I remember block, and I said it each one too. I was like block. You're worthless, block. You're worthless. Suck a dick, worthless. We'll open your cock holster more. Suck a dick. You're worthless, block. I think I said that 4 times. I was like, open your cock holster more, cocksucker. I like said that like 4 times. And I was like block. And I'm the loudest one there. You got to remember, I'm the loudest one there. I've tossed logic and fucking reason to the curb, and they're just gone. They're just, you know, poof. I've now blocked 13 people that I've never met before that I don't care about, and you know, or whatever. And I'm drunk and I'm off on some fucking thing, and I love the Grover house. It represents to me so many of the things that have to do with manhood. Do any of us truly know how to build a house? I'm sure the people who do it for a living do, but I don't think any of us truly know how to build a house. I think maybe my grandfather, who worked on houses his whole life, probably did. I don't. I really don't know. You know, he was a plumber and a fucking electrician and you know, he just knew how to do all of it. I mean, I didn't know how to do any of that shit. I never did want to know. I don't care. And so, yes, so it's easy for me to do the Grover block. I don't care what they think. They're the public at large to me. I could ask them for advice on how to not lose so many more ships, but I don't like them. Why would I talk to them? You know?
Sure, me either.
And so yeah, I don't respect or care about the public at large. So why would I care what they have to say about my house or my stream or, you know, the fact that I blocked all 13 of them and any of that? I had several people come at me after that. They were like, we heard about this huge blow up thing that you did. And I was like, yeah, I did. I was very drunk one night and I just lost it. Some dude mailed me about it. And he was like, yeah, if you want to avoid that in the future, there's lots of tactics. And I was like, oh no, I don't care. I told the poor dude who was in the public at large who was trying to help me. I was like, I don't care what he or you think. I just said it in the mail. To the guy who was trying to help me, I was like, I don't care what you or him think. Don't get it twisted. You know, was the attitude. I was like, I don't care what you think. You know, I didn't ask you. You mailed me out of the blue. I don't care what you think. I'm sorry.
Cannot dismiss
and this is the thing. I don't think Grover cared what anybody else thought either. It's not their house.
The value of
he doesn't need their advice. He doesn't need it.
That have experience, right?
And honestly, ever since I've seen this changed me fundamentally, where I'm like, God damn it, it's an idiot with a head as hard as stone. He's the immovable object. He'll never, sense just doesn't add into it. He's so dumb that he's reversed the spectrum and gone through a wormhole. And reverse polarity shifted himself in the Marvel universe or something, where he's come out his own butthole now, and he's turned reality into whatever he wants it to be, and it doesn't matter. what other people think. And ever since I saw this, it kind of fundamentally changed me. I was like, yeah, imagine if I just started Grover housing everything that I do, and I just believe in everything that I do, and I don't care about the outcome. I don't care what happens. And you have to live in the house with me if I build it all fucked up, and I don't care.
You need to also learn how to do the thing.
And I don't care, so I banned my chat. I did all kinds of crazy things. I banned my chat, and I fucking turn on 3-month mode, and I was like, I am not going to do this like other people do, and I don't care, and I will Grover my way through this motherfucker, and I will block you if you fuck with me. This has nothing to do with you. It never did. It is entirely a soliloquy.
It sounds like to me.
I'm sorry. I'm the Grover House.
Part of the value of chronicling this thing online.
Yeah, it's the sheer pig-headed stubbornness of just not gonna listen. I don't care.
Was so you could get feedback.
And it took the Grover House for me to understand how to do that. It's not abandon. It's some form of, I don't know. It's a leap of faith. It's not an abandon of logic or reason. It's this leap of faith into this understanding that nothing ever really did make sense, you know? And the Grover House isn't any more out of order than any of the rest of us. Right. You know, and there's so many powerful psychological lessons to learn from this podcast. It's just, they're marveling at it, just the stupidity of the physical aspects of it. Which, sure, you can get lost for many hours on that. I've done that like 3 times on the stream. But when you think of the philosophical ramifications of just like doing nothing when it comes to caring what other people think, learning what to do before you do something, preparing, researching, or anything to do with like some kind of scientific method, you just sort of Mad Hatter your way into building a house. And I now I'm jealous of him. I want to Mad Hatter a house. I want to Mad Hatter my own house. Like I would just want to build my own rest house in real life. I don't care. I've seen it before on television shows like the legendary Mick Dodge and stuff like this. People who literally in real life just started building their fucking Grover house.
Like just ignored every piece.
One time when I was homeless on the streets, I hung out with this lady, nice lady, but very crazy, craziest person I'd ever met, hands down. Anybody who ever met her would tell you she was the craziest person I had ever met. Now she had reasons to be like this. Primarily, a Littleton police officer raped her and left her to die in a dumpster. And I've got other stories about that I prefer not to tell, but that's what happened. She had a child because of this. That broke her sanity. And she was a drug addict who did too much methamphetamine. We're talking Oblivion NPC levels of depravity and no sense of logic or structure to her speech or any kind of rhyme or anything to her reason. Anything, no inner workings, really. Just a twisted spaghetti code, you know? I hate to say it, but that was her. I think she'd be the first one to say that, you know? I'm not being hurtful. I think that was just a realistic and I would say kind appraisal of who she is. And now we don't speak anymore. We had a falling out. But anyways, she was a pack rat hoarder, but she lived on the streets. And she used shopping carts to build man-made homes in the sheds of in the back of people's houses. she would ask if she could live in their shed. And if they didn't watch her within 3 to 6 days, she would convert the shed into a full-blown 7 shopping cart long caravan with insides and outs, twisted tunnels, and hidden possessions, and just a rat-infested warren of stuff that she had found on the streets. And watching her build her shopping cart house is exactly the Grover house.
Vice or criticism
and so when I see this and I see the Grover house, I also think methamphetamine. I think Pepe Silvio
deleted it.
And when I look at the floor plan, I think here's a Pepe Silvio person who's on methamphetamine and has some holes in their brain. And as we go further into the pictures, I believe my assessment is correct. You can spot meth a mile away. Meth looks like that. That is a methed up drawing of somebody's rendition of what a house of putting a rendition on a house would look like.
Get this wonderful thing that he made and praise him for it.
A project.
You're projecting your ideas onto him. Now projection can work both.
Yeah, and this is the problem. So a lot of this has to do with the projection of what other people's idea of a house normally looks like. We all knew that Grover House wasn't going to look normal. But I don't think it matters what other people think about the Grover House. I don't think it ever entered into his equation. I'm not sure he ever even knew that he was on the internet. I don't know if it matters. It's like a tree that falls in the woods or something like this, all of this. But I will say this, I don't think he ever took their considerations into consideration. And I find this to be extremely powerful. I don't think he took the city council into consideration. I don't think he took his family into consideration. I don't think he took anybody into consideration. Not anybody in this whole mess. Not the city, not the mud, not the people, not the family, not the house, not the surroundings, not the cars or the vehicles involved, or the $350,000 or anything like that. I don't think there was ever any estimation of anything at all. I imagine he was probably really high on meth and bad beer the whole entire time. And I think he was up too late for 15 hours a day working hard on the mud pit trying to get his car out of there or something like that. And I think he just cracked. And the funny part about the losing control of your house or your life or your mind or something like that is that other people don't usually actually play into it very much. It's actually usually all sussed out and played out in your own mind. I would say Frederick and this guy, I forget his name, they weren't ever a part of the Grover House guy's life. I doubt they've ever spoken. I doubt it matters. I doubt their estimation of how stupid his house looks matters. This was fundamentally strong for me in terms of like neurolinguistics and strength of character. I don't really think almost anything matters. I think it matters that humanity and all the other things that are alive on this planet are alive and that we're all in perfect stretched balance with each other and stuff. And I think that matters, But I don't think it matters what people think. I don't think it matters what you do beyond like rape and murder and stuff that leaves large, scarring, terrible consequences upon your community and stuff like that. I don't think it really matters what you do. I don't think it really matters what they say about it. I think we're all kind of just insignificant speck of dust flying around on an insignificant speck of dust And it doesn't matter if you make a Grover house of things or if you live in a perfectly stylized manner with servants and your life is, Downton Abbey and every single aspect of it is perfect. There's not even any war or anything like that most of the time. And you can range from that all the way through to probably what happened to this guy after the Grover house went bad. And everything in between. And I think it's all the same thing. I think it's all the same random set of fucking crazy experiences, and I know I'm going off like Nietzsche or some German philosophers here, and I know it's not that fun. Philosophy's never been that fun for me, even though I am probably a pretty good philosopher, I would say. And I think the Grover house is proof that you could have the entire internet laughing at you and it still doesn't matter. You could have the entire planet laughing at you, like Trump or whatever, and it still doesn't matter. None of it really matters. It's all just a bunch of random gobbledygook on the way to some procreation, I think. Your
negative thoughts on.
And so notice that they talk a lot about projection, and I kind of had to like self-actualize as a streamer about projection, about other people's problems with me, or why they might mistreat me or attack me or something like that, or if they even why they might like me or think of me positively or anything like that, right? And I don't think any of it matters. I think it all matters when you're thinking about yourself, but I don't think it ever matters what anybody else thinks. Now this comes across as some kind of like war crime excusing, ableist, do whatever, reminds me of that Simpsons episode where they're like, be like the boy, and he's like, my name is Rediger, and he's like, your name is not Rediger, it's Bart, and all this, and he's like, why do you do whatever you want whenever you want, Bart Simpson? And he's like, well, because I just want to, it's fun. And I think that's kind of, I always thought that there was like some kind of power figure or some kind of like overall plan or some kind of god or some kind of thing steering the wheel, or it was all just random stars and number generation and it's just astrology and horoscope and all this or whatever. But I don't think it matters. I think with 7 billion fucking people on the fucking planet, with almost every element of every science of almost everything sussed out, really, almost to the point where we could have the AI do it for us. I don't know. And we don't have everything sussed out at all. I'm not like saying that. I'm saying that we made huge leaps and bounds and all this. And I don't know if any of it matters. I don't think it mattered that the Grover House guy did what he did.
Positive.
Which is just make his own house with zero previous experience, I don't think it matters. I don't think it matters what they say about him. So they mention it here, and it's a very strong point. I'm glad that they do. I like their podcast a lot. I really liked every word of it because they're very calm, calculated people who are thinking about what they want to say and all this. I'm not like that, but I am calculated, I am a calculated person, so I try to think about what I'm saying first, but I don't, but I am calculated like them. I'm thinking about the deep ins and outs of this whole psychological situation of a man who just goes off on his own with zero knowledge and forges his way towards the pioneer land, while the ship obviously sinks into the fucking riverbank,
someone else, and it sounds like that's what.
And so they're gonna make a point here about how it matters, but it doesn't.
You're doing right now is you're projecting your positive, constructive.
Yeah, is there anything to do with between you and what he did with his house? I think no. You know, my PTSD therapist, she like taught me, like, you know, damage between two people is, or like, it's like ships that pass in the night. It's your childhood damage and their childhood damage, and you're just living it out next to them, and you're living it out loudly, and you're clashing because they're living out their damage into you, and you're living out your damage into them. And I was like, oh God. And she was like, never two the twain shall meet, and never shall never. She was like, you'd be surprised how liberating it is to understand this, because she was like, you know, just like the anger thing, I taught a bunch of people in my stream that anger is like a fucking bad contract that you shouldn't sign up for. You know, it's kind of like you know, those old CD company things, BMG Music, that sends you those CDs that you know you're gonna have to shell out like, you know, $1,500 to pay for at some point. Like, they made fun of this on Trailer Park Boys. The eons, you don't have to pay them back for eons, right? But then eventually eons does pass, and you do have to pay them back, and that's what's so shitty about debt. So, you know, like, you know, and the projection of other people's right or wrong, good or bad, funny, not funny, clown, not clown, or whatever. It seems like we put a lot of self-importance right now in our own opinions, but like he's about to say, the projection doesn't really matter too much to the Grover house, does it? I don't think it really does. It doesn't matter to the Grover house. It didn't play into his politics or how he executed the house. What they think about it doesn't matter.
Onto Grover, but that's not the way that Grover operates.
No, and so this idiot pretty much taught me how to live. You know, that's not how I operate anymore. I just don't care what they think.
I assumed the best of him, and obviously
I assume the best of him. Yeah, I assume he's, you know.
That's your first mistake. So we saw the stairs. This is the stairs. Dude, there are a couple.
Oh, cool! The stairs opens up to the sofa.
Really weird things about this, and in terms of the actual construction of the building, I want you to turn your gaze up to the recessed lighting.
Yeah. So you told me you wanted me to be like a guinea pig in this, like you wanted to like kind of, I don't know, or a rabbit.
Yeah, it's kind of a psychological experiment, understanding somebody who just doesn't give two shits about what anybody in the world thinks about what they're doing. It's the only time I've ever seen it. And I come back to this video. I've come back like 3 or 4 times. But I think somewhere in this video, I think I kind of self-actualized something. It's like this impenetrable suit of armor where I'm like, it's you know, I grew up on a band named Bush, and they had this album that fundamentally changed me on a deep level called Razor Blade Suitcase. And I remember him talking about, in a particular song called I think it's called like Heavy, I think, or something like that. He says, all your mental armor drags me down. We can't breathe when you come around. All your mental armor, or it's called Mouth. The song's called Mouth. And your mouth, right? All your mental armor in your mouth. It makes it so I can't breathe. It's all the time and all this. And I love that song, but I never really knew what he was talking about right away. And now I think I kind of do. You don't really need mental armor if you just don't care. You don't need any mental armor. There's nothing there to hurt.
A little bit, yeah.
You wanted to kind of.
I don't think Grover cared what anybody thought, and I think there's a lot to be said for that. And now I think of his house as beautiful.
Like draw conclusions.
It's chaotic neutral.
Out of me and see if I come to the conclusion.
And I think of the Grover house as beautiful now.
Just that you come to or whatever.
Because it's not someone else's design, it's his design, as fucked up as it turned out. Like this room is an idiot's purview.
Kind of been guiding you. I'm gonna be honest, this is a pretty shitty, this is like a Calhoun level experiment.
Yeah.
With the Mouse Utopia experiment sort of
yeah,
thing, where I'm like, specifically doing things to make sure you come to the right conclusions.
Yes.
Well, listen, there's a fly in the ointment here. I gotta.
There is something really fucking powerful about just not taking somebody else's estimation into the fucking equation at all. The guy just went off on, direct line to the horizon. He said, "Bring me the horizon," and then he did it. And I think there is a lesson here, a really deep, fundamental fucking lesson on how to pretty much become like Hercules. And you probably have like one Achilles, or become like Achilles, where, you have one Achilles heel tendon problem that you do have a weakness to or whatever. But most of the time, you're completely fucking impervious to any physical or mental or spiritual or psychological damage from other monkeys and humans running around, right? And so when you understand that it never did matter what they thought, when you understand that when you're feeling bad, it is because you want to feel bad, you free yourself. And I see here freedom that most of the richest, house builders in the world don't have. I'm sure some of them are crazy like this.
I Googled.
Okay.
He told me.
I mean, architects are famous for being kind of crazy and doing crazy things. And being, really stand out and very black sheep and very interesting. And I think one of the things about being an architect is you should technically maybe not care what other people think.
To be guys, and then he gave me a link to this Twitter thread. So I've been looking at this stuff.
What is the psychological undercurrent here? What are the lessons to be learned? There's a strong lesson to be learned about not giving a flying fuck about anything or anyone having to do with it, and just doing whatever you feel is right. The obvious bad ramifications and just ignoring them for some reason that I cannot fathom.
I was looking at this image, right, and I noticed those light fixtures that are interfering on an angle.
Yeah.
Right. And the first thing, obviously, this guy is going to sit in that couch to watch the game or whatever, and those lights are going to be directly in his face.
You saw it.
I have those light fixtures in the basement where I'm living right now, and I don't know if it's the same kind of light bulb, but they're very bright. Typically, the type of light bulb that go into those
basement light
in those fixtures is very, very bright. And the first thing I thought of was the Star Trek episode with Captain Jean-Luc Picard. There are four lights, when they're trying to get him to like deny reality or whatever. And then I'm laughing about that to myself. I made a mental note. I was like, I'm going to bring that up while we're recording this. And then I continued looking through material, and I fell onto this. They're called "What's Your Problem?" Well, there's your problem. Excuse me, which is a podcast that covered this. And I watched like a 5-minute video of their podcast, and their mind went to the same exact place. That Star Trek episode.
It seems like such an obvious problem, right?
Did he sit in the chair? Did he discover that this was going to be a problem too late, or is he not?
I don't think this guy sat in this room much. I don't think it matters. This is such a terribly bad lesson to try to teach people, but I do not think it matters.
Fazed by these lights in his face.
In the end, I think the fact that the lights are in his eyes is sort of immaterial to this story. I don't think it matters in the end.
Fucking face while he's trying to watch television.
Again, this really does feel like an engineer made it, doesn't it? Like there's no.
It looks like somebody who really wanted to have a clue.
Question about
but never did get one.
Usability or the
kind of like, you know, you ever meet a true incel that's like 30 or something like that? I've only ever met like 4 or 5 of them, I think, but I've met a few of them like that are in the dregs of despair over self-imposed sexlessness or whatever, and I swear to God, it's self-imposed.
like
I see what you mean by that.
he's not concerned about the way that the person is going to be interacting with the space that he's creating.
Yeah, like he's like, you know,
He's just making it. It's like, it's got a roof. How do I make the roof stable? It's got
how do I make the roof stable?
and then we're gonna get into that. He didn't even do that well.
It's all you're saying. It's all form and no function. It was like a utilitarian approach without the what happens after? What happens when you're actually using the living space?
But the worst part is, if he's an engineer, so he's supposed to be all function, but then there's no function.
There's no function either.
But there's also no form.
Function in the sense that like you won't get rain falling on your head when you're under the roof.
Right.
Unless he fucked that up too. Are you about to tell me he fucked that up too?
As far as I'm aware, the roof does not leak, but we don't know. We simply do not know for certain.
We can't
we
assume
don't know.
that
I'm certain.
We don't know the fate of the edition right now. I think that people have been keeping an eye on it, and it's still standing. Somehow.
So he created this upstairs.
It's still standing.
Loft area that he's treating like a living room type of an area, which I guess that's cool. I don't know. There's plenty of houses around here where, you know, because of just constrained spaces, they have second floor living rooms. You know, especially like townhouses, you'll see that.
Right.
So it's not that uncommon of a thing, but you don't see that in places where it's not necessary too often.
Yeah, like you were saying, he's got tons of real estate.
Yeah, dude, there's a whole nother house attached to it. Surely you could put your living room on the first floor.
I don't know. There's some
Surely you could put your
where,
living
like,
room on the first floor.
You have a landing, and then you have to go upstairs or downstairs.
Yeah, that happens occasionally. Like, oh, our TV's upstairs.
Have a
Yeah,
living room on the second floor, right? Like that's okay.
that happens.
But
Yeah.
this is just for the sake of it. Like, he wasn't really thinking about modern home design. He's very clearly not a designer. I don't even. Okay, you know what? This is just another example of weird shit that.
So it's very hard for us to understand somebody who has no rhyme or reason. It doesn't compute for us. We're like, I think a lot of the times I end up kind of getting bootstrapped with like nerds around me who live in an OCD reality, who like sort boxes all day and have very ordered, you know, sorted lives. And that's pretty opposite of who I am, I would say. And I think that reality is their rhyme and reason, is being able to order everything into a label box and categorize it. And I think one of the strong points to be learned from the Grover house is not everything needs to be this thing that you understand.
The subwoofer is on top of the VCR.
Maybe you think it's... Maybe there's a reason...
That is not a subwoofer, it is a center. The subwoofer is to the left of the TV.
That again, there's got to be some reason that he did that. Can you think of a...
That is a center. He put the center on top of the VCR because centers don't get very loud.
Little reason he would do that? Can you think of any utility to that whatsoever?
No, he just sat the speaker on top of it, probably.
The only reason I can think of is that he doesn't want to bother his downstairs neighbors, but the only things underneath this living space are the cars. Who's he going to disturb? The cars?
The garage. I don't know. Maybe he thought it looked cool. And it doesn't, but maybe
you think after looking at the edition, you think that Grover is considering aesthetics in any way?
Looking at the outside of the house again, you know what it looks like? It looks like You know those deep learning AI algorithms? That
You're totally right.
This is what a deep learning AI algorithm thinks a house looks like, based on images.
Oh my God, you're right.
Based on images of houses that it's been.
I love that point because and I think it stinks of that too. I think he had fundamentals were really shaky, but he at least had them.
Fed.
Oh my God, you're right.
Especially the one with the two garages. The picture with the two garages, because I don't know what the fuck I got. It's just
Nuka-Cola bottles.
then that could be said for the original MS Paint drawing too. His original blueprint, as it were. Because as you can see, the fucking staggered garage is there. Like a lot of the things that I was seeing here, I at first assumed they were implemented as he went along in the process, where it was like, shit, I didn't think about the fact that I was gonna have, I don't know, an extra couple of feet of space here, so now the garage is gonna be staggered, and it's gonna look bad, but you know, I can't help it because it's too late to fix it. No,
Right.
no, he intended that from the beginning, Fred.
Yes,
What does that mean?
this was his design.
These are not like retroactive, you know, trying to salvage something that was already fucked up. All of this was a conscious choice.
Now,
Yep.
there's one fun little fact
Madness.
that I really want to share with you.
God.
And in fact, I'm just going to read what he wrote. Oh, and the tie-in with the existing house. In my case, I decided it was easier just to put in a second wall, as I would have had to dick too much with the roof to try to tie straight in. The existing footer wasn't really built for a two-story house either. This will also allow for the settling in the addition to, hopefully, be even. I ended up undercutting my foundation and pouring a new footer about a foot deeper than the old footer, which the masons blocked up with a 1-inch gap. Wasn't enough. The existing wall bowed in 1.5 inches, which ended up messing up my new walls too, which sucked. Sad face. You can't tell in the finished house, but it was readily apparent when hanging the kitchen cabinets, and it still bothers me that my wall isn't perfectly plumb.
Sad face.
So he fucked up this addition so bad that the walls are bowing in 1.5 inches.
Amazing. And then there had to be
16D nails to nail through the new triple 2x12 header. 16 nails for 12 inches.
kitchen cabinets put onto those walls.
Right. And so at that point, a meme started circulating among something awful about load-bearing drywall.
Yeah, in my investigations, I kept seeing that pop up, the load-bearing drywall thing.
Load-bearing
which,
drywall.
I don't know if you don't know anything about house construction, it's just a fucking oxymoron.
Drywall is like you can break it with like a spoon.
Like drywall is just made to cordon off
It's like crumble
spaces.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't.
It doesn't bear
put
loads.
walls
Yeah, it's
up. You're not like constructing beams out of drywall or whatever.
no.
You know,
Mhm.
you're not
No.
making the frame of the house out of drywall.
No.
Did you know, Fred, that I had a real estate license? I was a New York
Really?
State realtor. I was a realtor. Right?
Really?
Yeah. It was a complete waste of time. Right? I didn't sell a single house. I had the license for almost 2 years. I showed a lot of houses though, and I did get to see a lot of really dumb shit.
Tickets to really dumb
Blood
shit.
Eagles are ahead of you in line. I'd stop you, but I think I quit. Our squad was guard. Yeah. Name's Woods. We got high. I think I can go easy. Make better choices.
What?
Add-ons and just botched, like DIY stuff. And it strikes me that this stuff is hard. Doing all of this
Right.
this shit, it requires
It is hard.
a lot of
It's
knowledge.
yeah, it's
and
not easy.
experience.
Yeah,
But
it's-
I so often I see instances, almost like a whole culture around. I would imagine mostly men, men,
Right.
manly men.
Right, like the sort of DIY. I'm going to impress my wife by building a shed.
Exactly. Like these people, they think that they could just I don't know, maybe watch one YouTube video, or in the case of Grover, read one book, and then just do it because they're an expert now.
This kind of thing is really, really commonplace.
It is. I've seen a lot of it. All right. It's in fact
It
Home
is.
Depot's entire business model is built
Just
around
built on
catering
it
to these people.
to these people.
Specifically.
Yep.
There's a
someone's
cottage
responding to the
industry.
flooding
Not
attack.
really. I'm exaggerating.
If
There's a
there
cottage
are automated
industry
defenses still working, they'll all
around
be
this type of
activated.
fucking thing.
We
Yes.
need to
And
see
what
more
what
than just
what
politicals.
really
Be careful.
sorry to rant, but what gets me
You're fine.
Let's get moving. I'll follow
kind
you,
of like
Lily.
just
Mike,
what
I'm
shocks
going to
me-
interrupt you. I'm going to interrupt you just to say, we're recording a show.
Yeah.
Please talk.
I will.
What are you getting?
I will. What shocks me about it, what's always shocked me about it, is that we're talking about your fucking house. All right?
Right.
Your actual shelter from the elements. You know what I'm saying? Like really high up there on Laszlo's hierarchy of needs thing. You've seen that. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah.
This is
Laszlo's hierarchy of needs.
Got it. I was able to use the Pip-Boy's protocols to get the doors open, but it fried the circuits. If we run into any more locked doors, we're gonna need another way through.
Oh yeah.
Maslow's hierarchy of needs is a theory in
Thank you, Sprouts. I've liked and sub to your channel.
psychology. It argues that there are 5 stages of human needs that motivate our behavior. Abraham Maslow proposed his theory in 1943 after studying what he called exemplary people, such as Albert Einstein or Eleanor Roosevelt. First, there are physiological needs, such as the need to breathe, eat, drink, or sleep. The moment we get enough of that and we feel awake and our bellies are full, we get motivated by the next thing. Now we want safety. We try to earn money, build up resources, and look for shelter that protects us against dangers. Once we are satisfied and feel safe, we have time to think about what we want next. At stage 3, we seek love and belonging. We desire to be close to family and friends, belong to a society.
I am a person who I don't think has a lot of needs. I don't think I need almost any of this.
Or join a gang. But the moment we
It's weird because I look at all this and I'm like, ugh.
feel completely part of a group, we already wish to be a little different than the rest. At stage 4, we look for esteem, self-confidence, and respect from our peers. We want to be someone. If we have money, we buy a
It doesn't work for me. I'm terribly sorry. I don't believe it works for me.
Not Laszlo.
Laszlo. Same shit. You know, hey, listen, you figured out what I meant. That's the important part, right?
Laszlo's hierarchy of, these might be nices.
Yeah. Laszlo, Maslow's underappreciated, lesser-known cousin, Laszlo. But what I'm saying is, there are a lot of things that you can, like, this isn't, a knitting project or like learning how to play guitar or something like that. Okay, the roof doesn't cave in on your fucking family if you play the wrong chord. You know what I'm saying? If you're teaching yourself how to play guitar.
Now, this guy, I should say that Grover professes, he says, I'm an engineer many, many times. And he says, I got all of this worked out, and everything's fine.
He claims to know what he's doing.
That's the thing, is we can't, he was a military contractor. And so but we don't really know what kind.
Well, here's the
What
thing
can I
about
help
it,
you
dude.
with, Initiate?
When you're talking about a house, right? And I'm related to people who have the family businesses and things like that, or work for other
Right.
businesses involved in like renovations and contracting and home improvements and stuff like that. So I know a little bit of what I'm talking about, just peripherally. Right?
Sure.
These people will attempt all of these things while having, no background in like architecture, you know, plumbing, electricity, HVAC, right? If you're a specialist in one of those things, then you're qualified to work in that thing. He's saying he was an electrician primarily, right? In the day, he was
not an electrician, an electrical engineer.
An electrical engineer. Yeah. I guess those are two different things.
Yeah, those are distinct.
But there, you see, he's building an entire. Essentially, he's building a house. Like this addition, right? It's all right. There's no kitchen in it, right? We can assume there's no kitchen in it. Not in the addition.
I think there might be actually. Because he built his that was a really important part of this. Is there was a kitchen.
He put the kitchen into the add-on.
Yes.
Okay, well then you need a plumber for that. You see what I'm saying? Like,
we haven't gotten to the plumbing problems.
There's so many variables that go into this shit. Is what I'm trying to say. If you fuck up one aspect of it, like there's mold. If you fuck this aspect of it up, there's fire. You fuck this up, you could. Carbon monoxide poisoning, kill your whole family. The best case scenario in this is that the finished product just looks like shit and is actually safely habitable.
Now you know what? We actually have the word of God here. Someone asked him, you know, how are you building this? And he wrote, mostly intuition, I guess. None of this stuff is None of this stuff is rocket science, and normal people do it all the time.
Oh my
Just
God.
usually not so much altogether. I have a solid engineering background, and between the code books and examples from the web, I was able to do most of it. You're right. You absolutely nailed it, Mike. He just went online and looked at basic tutorials and was like, yeah, I could do it. I had a few questions that I posted to DIY forums, but to be honest, it wasn't very helpful. They were mostly all, that's beyond a DIY job. You need to hire a pro. So people online...
And he said, fuck that.
Yeah.
Wow.
I love that there were people online actively advising... Like, DIY people tend to be pretty gung-ho, right? It's like, oh no, you know, whatever, I'm just gonna do it myself. Even these people... And we're talking early internet DIY people, right? Anyone who's like in an online space this early, this is 2006. Before that, because he was looking into this earlier. He's trying to figure out all of this, and even these early internet adopters who typically were very independent people were saying, you need a pro for that, dude. And Grover just did it anyway.
You know what I'm starting to think? I'm starting to think DIY is dangerous.
It depends. It 100% depends. It's like, dads, build a shed first. You'll probably be able to get your DIY-ness out with a shed.
Work on the thing that doesn't people don't live in.
Right,
you know,
like you put your rakes in that thing and you leave it to the spiders, right? It's outside in the backyard, leave it.
That way, if it collapses, you got some dead spiders. You know what? Could be a net positive, depending on how you feel about spiders.
Yeah, it might be a good excuse to buy a new rake.
But yeah, to just kind of use your actual house
Family.
as a guinea pig.
Yeah.
To kind of cut your chops, and he's admitting that he has no idea what he's doing. It's like just criminal. I feel bad for the house. I feel bad for his family. You know, there's kids in the picture now. I had a feeling that when I saw some of these pictures, I knew the type of mind that was behind it. Like, yeah, the type of guy who's like, oh, I could do that. Oh, I could do that. And then in the face of people saying like, man, I don't know. That's some complicated stuff that you got to be willing to admit that you might not have the skills or the experience to be able to do that. And his response to those people was to ban them from the forum, or otherwise completely ignore them.
Right.
Now, again, I'm not against people teaching themselves how to do something, but there is something to be said for, I don't know, paying any kind of attention to somebody on the outside who knows what they're talking about, giving you a warning. Oh, and again, this is your fucking house. There's not a lot of room for error here. If something goes wrong here, wait, are you homeless? What was? Can we speculate? Maybe it was a financial reason why he didn't hire the pros. Maybe he doesn't have as much money as we thought he does. Maybe that's why, and he didn't want to admit it or something. I don't have enough money to hire professionals, so I need to do these modifications on my own.
Right.
Can we speculate on that? Is that a possibility? He doesn't
He was
say that.
making a ton of money. Like, he bragged about it a bit in the thread, as I recall.
He said that he wanted the renovations to cost between $80,000 and $85,000. I think he said.
You know what? Yes.
The initial post that he made that started the entire thread. Do you want to read it?
Yeah, sure. He says, my wife and I are building an 85K 2,000 square foot addition onto our house, and we're doing it completely by ourselves. Framing, sheathing, roofing, doors, windows, flooring, plumbing, electrical, house wrap, kitchen, stairs, tile, trim, everything but the concrete and the siding. And we later got lazy on the drywall, too. Yeah, no kidding.
Yeah, we got lazy on it.
You can't get lazy on the drywall if it's load-bearing, buddy.
It's like he knows that all this is a mistake. Like, intuitively, he knows he shouldn't be doing this.
Do you think that there's a part of him that recognized that he should have been stopping?
The fact that that sentence is there tells me that he did. It tells me he does. He knows he's making a fucking mistake, and he's actively making it while people are trying to stop him, and he's shutting them down with his moderator privileges.
He did start by building a shed. We talked about building an addition, but all we ever did was build a 12 by 12 shed that became our lawnmower garage / storage room / wood shop / What is with him listing things out so far?
I don't know. He did it twice in this paragraph.
Like, a lot. Woefully inadequate. It's
the new addition adds a new kitchen, 2-car garage, workshop area, and 3 bedrooms, and he does it a 3rd time. More accurately, a sewing room, a guest bedroom, and a storage room, a bathroom, and a living room.
The sewing room was because of, like, problems getting it approved. Because if he did not get the entire edition approved, he wouldn't legally be allowed to sell the house.
Yeah, I mean, this stuff is, you need permits for this shit. There's things you're not legally allowed to do to a house, depending on jurisdiction or whatever. But to be fair, scroll back up for a second to the initial post, because he's saying framing, sheathing, because the fact that he lists things like this is actually, like, it really makes you think about the scope of his dumbassery. Framing, sheathing, roofing, doors, windows, flooring, plumbing, electrical, house wrap, kitchen, stairs, tile, trim. How is there a person on this earth, an individual, who can do all those things?
Well, he says in the second post, I'm an electrical engineer by day. I'm pretty skilled at AutoCAD, but certainly not skilled in construction.
Pretty skilled at AutoCAD.
Remotely like this before.
Oh my god.
You are not skilled at AutoCAD.
It's he's got confidence, and he's got money, and he's got no common sense. A dangerous combination.
Right, and I think that originally it was going to be much, much cheaper, and then the cost ballooned. Which is really unsurprising, right? I feel like that's the fallback. That's the problem, because a complete noob will not know what things to buy and won't buy the right things and might end up spending a little bit too much. An intermediate ends up using his money to try to make up for his lack of ability. An expert will be able to pay as little as possible to get the job done and still make something good. And this is squarely in, like, the intermediate territory, where he's way overspending to make up for his ineptitude.
Do we have a final tally on how much he spent to do this?
I think it ended up being like 85K. God, 85K for that edition.
Because it seems like he started with that estimate. He said, I want to spend 80 to 85K before he even started doing it. I guess he factored in all the costs that he thought was going to be the costs of it. He factored them all in, and he came up with that number. Did he end up having to spend more than that? Do we know? We just don't have enough information. Like we said, guys, it's a rabbit ditch. It's not a rabbit hole. Primarily because he just couldn't take the abuse after a while and deleted everything. Does he still have an online presence at all, this guy?
And this is actually what I wanted to discuss with you. We've looked at all this up. Oh yeah, one other thing that there were actually 2 other things that I wanted to explain before we really get into my thoughts, my breakdown of what I think really happened.
Okay.
So first of all, take a look at the back door and look how high up the door is.
Yep.
Here are the
It's
steps.
at least a foot off the ground. And
It ended up being like
Damn.
6 inches off the ground or something.
is that right?
It's
I'm not a good
amazing.
I'm not a good judge. I can't eyeball that. But I can't help but notice that in all of these images, the building's foundation is visible from every angle of it. You can see the foundation.
I forgot. We do have a number. I'm so
Okay.
sorry to interrupt you.
Oh, okay, go ahead.
At any rate, I've got $170,000 tied up in a 3,200 square foot, 6-bedroom, 3-bath house, which I think is pretty good. :D.
That's not a DIY project. There's no such thing as a $170,000 DIY project. That is not a DIY project anymore. That's a
It's
full-scale
kind of
fucking.
inflated.
That's a full-scale construction operation at that point.
Just imagine how much faster and how much neater it would have gotten done if he just hired people to do it. For like the same price.
If your DIY project requires a structural engineering degree, and for you to be
These vessels were once filled
fluent
with
in
specimens.
like 7 different
Stock
kinds of
here so that
trades
the
in order for you to
captain
complete it,
could turn them
that's
into
not a DIY
versions of
DIY
nature.
anymore.
Like
That's not a
Wesley,
DIY project
they
anymore. That's
concerned
something else.
themselves only with whether they could do these
I'm looking. So of the 80K, so he spent 80K on it. He spent 80K. The house in total is 170K.
Oh.
And
turned what they
he
left behind
believes,
to better
he
ends.
believes that the addition added 100K onto the value of
That's
the house.
not how that works.
He
that's not-
actually believes that his house is now worth $100,000 more because he made that addition.
That's nuts. Now, having been a real estate agent, I can tell you that when you do improvements to a house, when you eventually sell that house, you cannot just tack on the cost of whatever you did. If you put in a swimming pool and that costs 10 grand, or a deck that costs 10 grand, you can't just be like, well, you can't just take the market value of that house and then add the amount that you spent to do the improvement. That does not work that way. That's not how home values are decided. That's just not even remotely close to being true. It can affect it, but you can't. It's a little bit more nuanced than that.
But you know what? It's how Grover thinks it works. And that's what really matters at the end of the day.
It does.
You know what I was thinking? You really have to pity the real estate agent who is eventually going to get this listing one day and have to try and sell this.
Regret the ugliness you find.
Right.
You know what I'm saying? It's like,
The things
that is not an envious job at this point, because this thing is a absolute fucking abortion of a fucking house.
And this thing, like, and the worst part is, it's in a swamp.
It's a hard sell to begin with.
blame you
Right.
Yeah.
You know, I mean, I don't know who's living in swamps besides ogres.
I'm trying. Okay, so the other thing that I really wanted to mention was the plumbing. Like, there was some really bad rain, and the pipes got lifted up and flooded the yard.
I can't imagine. something
Oh
like that
my god, look at this idiot. And there's his son being like, yeah, Dad, I think we lost the house.
happening to this person. How?
How, right? Is that?
This is an amazing image. This is just wow. The more I look at it, just oh my god. So that's some kind of clay or earth. This is the composition of the ground around this part of the country, I guess, or in this area. That is swamp.
In the Great Dismal Swamp.
The Great Dismal Swamp.
Virginia, by the way.
This is Virginia.
That's where it is.
Not
Oh god, and it was probably a bad year. You can see that it's a bad year. So it was super soggy and wet all year, so his yard just descended into a quagmire. Probably stayed that way for like 4 years or something until they probably bulldozed all of it.
Not New England.
I believe, yes.
Not New England.
There's his plumbing that he's torn up out of his goddamn fucking front yard. This is when the meth and the alcohol probably really doesn't serve you, is when you're tearing up your front yard like this at that point.
It's not New England. Yeah, it's East Coast. It's Virginia.
Pipes are now that I guess were intended to be subterranean, are now once again seeing the sunlight.
I think that this image might have been when he was installing them, but they definitely like got lifted up.
Look at his face. Doesn't he just look so confused?
This is a man who thinks that he's got everything figured out, and it just keeps going to shit, and he can't figure out why. 'Cause he planned for all of it.
Like, he's looking at this fucking chaos, and he's like, man, but I followed that 15-minute YouTube video to the T. Take a look at the shed for a second behind him. So when I was looking at that other podcast, they had pointed out, and I feel like I wouldn't have noticed this otherwise. I want to point it out to you. That pipe that's coming out of the shed.
Right.
What is that?
What is that?
Can you fathom the function of that?
That's where that comes from.
Where's that pipe? That pipe that comes out of the shed. That's where that comes from.
Oh,
that's where
I saw an image with an emote, with like the cutest little emote of a little pipe coming out of a shed, and it's smoking, and it's adorable. Let me find it. I get it now.
Like the shed
now.
is smoking, like a pipe. Like the shed.
Hold on,
or
it's like toot toot. It's really cute. Toot toot.
Toot toot.
We'll have it up on screen. If you can't see it, it's adorable. It's the shed with the pipe just sticking out of this random hole in the shed and a little party hat. There's a little note coming out of it.
I still want you to try to answer what you think the function of that pipe is, at least in his mind.
Yeah. Extra big bong.
Don't let me die.
Take a fat shed rip.
That would explain a lot, wouldn't it?
You're not with those others, are you?
It brings a whole new meaning to the term, like hotboxing, right?
How else do you manage to live in a place called the Great Dismal Swamp? Like, psychologically speaking,
It's probably got to be stoned. Yeah.
like at least 85% of the time.
You got to find a way to make it less dismal somehow, right?
The other 15% is him trying to plan out the additions onto the Grover house.
Well, he did that on drugs too. But how else do you explain the fucking like Euclidean like?
Yep, he did this on drugs. Well, you can see it. The whole thing was a mess of. Probably, I knew a guy like this who got too high and let his construction go to shit like this. And yeah, it's a mixture of Coors Light and methamphetamine and lack of sleep and your Pepe Silvio, your front yard. I've seen it before.
Architecture that I've been exposed to here tonight. This guy, this image is just my favorite. Like, he just looks so confused. Like, I just.
I've got to go to the bathroom, guys. I'm terribly sorry. I'll be right back. I'm gonna pause the video, or no, I'm not gonna pause the video anymore. I'm just gonna hurry.
Everything hurts. I feel sick.
Is he coming back? Please, help us.
I can't take it anymore. Is he coming back? Somebody get us out of here!
Please,
Unfortunately, oh god, you're so annoying. And I can't leave this damn dungeon without losing the progress either. Oops.
Wildered, and he's in the middle of all this shit. Just the earth is rebelling against him. It's the story of somebody who just trudges forward in the face of all opposition, not considering that any of the ruination around them is any fault of their own, not even entertaining the possibility, probably getting angry if anybody suggests that any of this is his fault, you know? And he's just standing there like, how could this have happened? How could it have gone so wrong? You know,
and he's not putting any of the blame on himself.
Not that I've seen. I mean, maybe there's more posts from him. Maybe there's more things he's written where he acknowledges some of his mistakes. But this is just one of those things. Like it's kind of epic, and I mean epic in the sense of like Sisyphean or something. You know,
Right.
like mythological, like
Yes.
or like Job from the Bible. You know, where that might be how he sees himself. You know what I'm saying? That might be how he sees himself, where it's like, man, I'm trying so hard and I'm teaching myself all this new knowledge, and it's just none of it's working for some reason. I don't know what it is. Maybe it's just the universe. It's the universe. The universe doesn't want me to succeed. That's it. That's who's to blame. God.
Right.
God, this is God's fault.
I want to wrap this up. And I want to come back. At the beginning, I said that I wanted to bring you around to my side, into my belief, and that was my goal. This is absolutely contrary to pretty much everything else that I do, where I don't want to convince people of new things. I don't really have an agenda, but in this case, I do. And
Well, at least you admit your agenda.
Yeah. Here, I'm willing to admit my agenda. I'm going to, or I should say that I am allowing myself to have an agenda. And I'm going to say to you, right now, the Grover house is not that bad.
Not that bad in terms of, in
the grand scheme of things, like all the awful things on the internet, the
Yep.
weird, hilarious things.
It
the Grover
doesn't
house
matter.
is barely worth a footnote.
It doesn't matter.
in the pantheon of fuck-ups, this thing is actually ranking kind of low, is what you're
Right.
saying.
Why is this legendary? And I have a theory as to why.
Streisand effect?
No,
it's not
it's-
really. It goes beyond that. Because, yes, the thread got nuked, right? Like, he just kept deleting posts that, contradicted him in any possible way. But he also had a reputation. In fact, I'm going to quote Eliza here in this thread. He said, Grover worked for some branch as a contractor, but was a mod in the Something Awful military forum for some reason. So it was a mod, not an admin. I'm sorry. I think I got that wrong.
Okay.
But for some reason, he really wanted to be true. So he would post these huge, extremely poorly thought out, but absolutely confident debates about U.S. military intervention. So he was so hated that the people in his own forum rose up against him to try to remove him as moderator. Here, you know what? Eliza says it best. Grover was such a dumb shit, so universally hated. Members of his Circle Jerk Our Troops sub-forum.
Yep, I bet they did.
Eventually, if they had the run of the place.
Circle Jerk Our Troops. Oh my god.
Modding.
Oh.
And you know what? Let's go ahead and read it. Let's read the post from one of these people. Grover has offended and alienated many of the military members and GIP posters. For instance, he has stated that he is entitled to the respect of a
he's
senior
changed the codes
military
for the door,
officer,
we're not getting
lieutenant
through.
colonel, as a result of
lot
his
of knights that would
civilian
probably
position,
try to blow up
a
the
suggestion that is genuinely
think we can do better
insulting
than
to
that.
military members and demonstrates a lack of character and
These doors
understanding of the
are
very foreign
hydraulically
population he's
We can
supposed to be
find the
moderating.
lines that feed to
Grover's
this door,
self-righteous
we
vanity
might
and
be able to
apparent
cut the
contempt for
pressure
the
holding it
military
shut.
dates back
Look
to the
for a
inception.
utility room nearby.
Yeah, unlock something. Disconnected. You better not have started this over. Oh my god, did you start this over? I'm gonna be so mad if you did. Oh my god.
Inception of GIP. Remember, this is who he is moderating. He is not a positive representative for GIP and is not wanted. Take a look at this thread from the first month of GIP's existence. In situations where he's unable to use his authority against his detractors and people do not fear immediate retaliation, he is largely incapable of taking part in the discussion due to others' reactions to him. Still, he does not stray from targeting forum users who mock him in IRC, where he has no moderating power. This is highly inappropriate, as his authority is only relevant in GIP, and thus he should only consider posts in that subforum.
The card doesn't work.
Oh, this is from
Blackburn
this is
must have
from a
overridden the door
blogspot called
codes.
like this was a blogspot website called Get Rid of Grover.
If he's changed the codes,
A
there's
whole
lot of knights that
blogspot
would
was
probably-
made specifically to remove
find-
Grover
look
as
for
a
a
mod.
This was a person who believed that he knew everything, from how to how the United
Oh,
States
good, it
military
saved me.
should conduct itself in a
To how to build
a wartime
additions.
situation, to electrical, plumbing, heating, everything that goes into the every aspect of building a house.
Mhm.
He was so convinced and so sure of himself that he didn't need any kind of education or experience to do anything or have an opinion on any of these really complicated things, that people
Right.
started to resent him for it.
Mhm.
And I think what you're getting at is a lot of the sensation around Grover House took place precisely because of his reputation. People
Yes,
people
if-
saw the really, it seems like the house itself, the existence of the house and all the work that he was doing was an extension of his personality and what people already fucking hated could stand about him.
I couldn't
Right?
put it any better myself.
They saw everything that he was doing and they were like, yeah, that is so totally this guy that we've been putting up with for however long.
Mhm.
This is the personification of everything that this guy embodies. Just an arrogant fucking idiot who just thinks he knows everything, in reality has no knowledge, no experience, and does not belong here, and should not be participating even in this conversation, where he absolutely has no place being here. When they saw him chronicling this construction project, they just, they started rubbing their hands together. They were like, time to just take a big old steamy shit on this guy, and then the internet did its thing.
Mm-hmm. Because the admins would not remove him, and because he would not remove himself, something awful did what it did. What it does best. It made him infamous.
And there you go. There you have it. I see what you mean. The Grover
Yeah.
house actually is not that bad.
Now, it is terrible, right? Like, let's make no excuses for it. It's terrible. It's ugly. It's barely functional. The walls are bowing in. Like, it's not good. But it's not nearly as bad as people like to joke about it. Instead, it's all of the members of this forum collectively, like, coming together to hate this one person and this thing which represents him so well.
It's really got to be just endemic to his personality. I hope his wife doesn't get a cavity, you know, because then he'll just be like, "Oh, hon, I got to drill in the
Oh, no.
I got to drill in the garage, and I just watched a 10-minute YouTube video about dentistry." He's sitting there fucking yanking his fucking kid's teeth out with pliers. Braces? You don't need braces. I watched a YouTube video about this. Because it's got to extend to other things. It's got to extend to other... When's he going to start a farm? Start growing his own crops? What else is he going to try to attempt? In the swamp? Yeah.
No, I totally just watched this video. I know which mushrooms are poisonous.
Well, you know, at least the soil on his property will be fertilized because, you know, I guess he probably fucked up, you know, the plumbing so badly that there's just feces all over his property.
I think that literally happened.
Is that
like
what's in that picture?
Line,
is that
like the sewer line? I don't think that's what's in that picture, but there was mention of his sewer line, like rising up after a really bad rainfall, and the water table rising. I believe it was.
Yeah,
is that a thing water tables do? They rise, right?
Oh yeah, that sounds right. Let's go with that.
I got. Hold on. You know what?
It appears
Can
neither
water
the
tables
nor the
move?
Blood Eagles were a match for you. Quite formidable.
Can vary in different areas. Wow, excessive pumping can lower the water table. I don't know if it can be raised. I think it can.
The water table is actually a really complicated thing.
This episode has been really bad for misinformation. I called him an admin when he was a mod. What else did I say? There were a couple of other things that bothered me where I was wrong and then corrected myself much later.
You call insanity,
guess we got to record the whole episode over again.
GG. Yep, let's go.
It's fine.
Not just
It's fine. But I was about to say that the water table is a really complicated thing, and
yes,
you should probably not claim to understand it after doing one Google search of it. You know.
But I'm just taking after my hero.
Yeah, your hero, Grover.
I thought I was going to have to do a little bit more convincing, but no.
Do you believe I did this all?
You were right there. You came to pretty much the same conclusion that I did.
The house is an extension of the person.
It's really too bad that information about the Grover house and Grover in general is so difficult to find because the Something Awful archives are you can't even browse them. Like I think you need the specific link to the thread just to find it. It's awful. Like it has to be an external link, and searching through the archives is an absolute nightmare.
I will be entirely
Which is why he wanted to do the topic in this format rather than down the rabbit hole, because it would have
a little bit more chill.
No
Not worried about like disseminating every last bit of information that I can find, or like
the Brotherhood is
telling the story of it, because the story is so full of holes.
Yes.
Just no.
My work.
This feels like a good home for it, and I think that it will nestle quite nicely in the Warrens.
All right, Fred. So I heard you're looking for a house. You're in luck because I'm a real estate agent.
Oh.
All right. Now I've got two houses in your price range. Okay.
Pleasure or pride.
Okay.
Had I been capable.
First one.
I do not.
Gorgeous. Right. It was the site of a triple murder-suicide. And the guy ate his wife in the
Thank God I got it done. Yes.
It's a lovely two-bedroom colonial.
All right.
Think of me what
The
you
other
will.
one is the
It will change nothing.
Grover house. Yeah. So when do you want an appointment for the first one?
Yeah, no, I'll call you back tomorrow about
Call
it.
you back, okay.
I'm just gonna I'm gonna talk to my brother about it, but yeah,
Right.
we'll get me in there.
All right, do let me know.
I
get you.
I
We're gonna
feel
have
like
an open house.
so here's the thing, right? That house might be haunted, but the Grover house itself is the haunting.
It really.
Look
it
at
really
it.
is.
Look at it. It's not that the space is haunted. It's the house itself that is the malevolent entity.
It really is.
There's no cleansing it.
You know how they say that sometimes.
While known to many from the most affected areas, the 1985 Austrian wine poisoning is often a hazy memory to those in Europe and entirely unknown to those outside of it. When asked about it, people will mention the unwitting consumption of hazardous chemicals and a mass public panic, but the details will be muddled or contradictory. Most sources with precise information are left untranslated, and misinformation about the event is commonly repeated through English publications. So what was the Austrian wine poisoning? During the 1980s, Austrian wine had a reputation in Germany as a cheaper alternative to domestic and Italian wines. Often found in grocery stores, these wines were made specifically to meet the high demand for sweetness from German consumers, and the sweetest wines could consistently be priced the highest. The chief difference of Austrian wine, however, was that much of the industry had been arranged for mass production. First, vineyards would leave the grapes on the vine as long as possible, allowing them to ripen. If left for long enough, the producers would gain the legal right to label their bottles as the sweet and lucrative Predikatswein. These ripened grapes would be harvested in late summer and shipped to manufacturers who would ferment the grapes in large vats. The resulting wine would then be transported to bottlers in bulk. The relatively high quality achieved by this process allowed Austrian winemakers to undercut the prices of older, smaller-scale wineries who were more established, and mass production made for a more reliable source of wine. But after years, this production grew from prosperous to suspicious. During the 1970s, the amount of Predikatswein being produced surpassed feasibility, and Austrian investigatory bodies began seeking warrants to test this mass-produced wine in order to discover precisely how these seemingly impossible numbers were being achieved. Without evidence incriminating particular wineries, however, the courts refused to grant these warrants. Even if they could investigate, the Austrian authorities were understaffed and overworked, allowing the wine industry in the country to operate largely unchecked and unsupervised. In one instance, a wine merchant arrived at a cooperative with his tanker to collect wine, but as they were pumping wine into the truck, the man noticed that they had attached a second hose. Investigating further, he found that they were pumping water into the truck as well. Enraged, the man refused to take the wine and approached the Austrian wine control, who told him that they would be unable to begin inquiries for another 6 weeks due to the massive amount of work they already had to perform. Finding this answer unacceptable, he then approached the Ministry of Agriculture, who revealed to him that there were only 18 inspectors tasked with overseeing approximately 60,000 companies. With such a state of affairs, there was little question that adulteration of wine, especially Predikatswein, had become widespread. In 1975, the Chamber of Labor and Employees in Salzburg, Austria, performed both chemical tests and expert taste tests on 76 different bottles of Austrian wine. Of them, only 23 were properly labeled and 56 were defective. But what investigators couldn't have known was precisely how large the problem had grown, or how far winemakers would go to make a profit. On December 21st, 1984, an unknown man with a German accent entered the Federal Institute of Agricultural Chemistry in Vienna and placed a bottle full of liquid on the table, declaring that inside of this bottle was the chemical being used to produce such vast quantities of wine. He then exited the building, leaving the bottle on the table. He was never identified. After a month of analysis, chemists were able to determine that the bottle contained numerous chemicals, several of them toxic. Though this tip wasn't enough to investigate any winery in particular, it meant that they knew what tests to apply if given the opportunity, and this would come less than 2 months later. In mid-February of 1985, another tip was sent from someone inside the Austrian wine industry to government officials, a tip that seemed too ridiculous and brazen to be believed. A factory owner was purchasing large amounts of a chemical, one of the chemicals from the mysterious bottle, and attempting to write it off on his taxes as a business expense, claiming that it was all to be used for his small tractor. After inspecting the documents, this blatant discrepancy proved enough to obtain a warrant, and a chemical investigation team was sent. Upon their arrival, they confiscated the wine being stored in the vats and sent samples back to a laboratory. Soon, their suspicions were confirmed. the wine contained significant amounts of diethylene glycol. Diethylene glycol is typically used as a solvent or combined with other chemicals to make numerous liquids such as brake fluid and wallpaper stripper. Its effect on humans, however, is brutal. After ingestion, diethylene glycol enters the bloodstream, where it is transported throughout the body and takes destructive effect in two particular ways. The first, and better understood, is its interaction with the liver and the kidneys. When diethylene glycol enters the liver, it is metabolized into two new chemicals, 2-hydroxyethoxyacetic acid and diglycolic acid. When the latter of these encounters the tubules of the kidneys, it enters the cells and damages the mitochondria, causing necrosis, or literally, cell death. If enough of the kidney is damaged, it can no longer adequately filter toxins out of the blood, a condition called renal failure. This eventually leads to metabolic acidosis, where the blood becomes too acidic for the body to use. The second and more poorly understood effect is that on the nervous system. Through mechanisms apparently still unknown, ingestion of diethylene glycol causes damage to the myelin sheath and axon of nerve cells, making them unable to properly carry electrical signals. Unchecked, this can lead to permanent paralysis, either partial or complete. Studies of people affected by diethylene glycol showed that nearly every single neuron was damaged by the poisoning to some degree. Though the amounts found in this wine were small enough not to cause acute poisoning, long-term consumption can cause the same effects and lead to organ and brain damage. While adding diethylene glycol to wine was unorthodox, the reasons for doing so were easy to glean. Wines with added sugar were worth less, and tests were often performed to make certain that no additives were being used without proper labeling. This meant that, to sweeten wine without reducing profits, another chemical would have to be used, one that was more difficult to detect. Diethylene glycol was poorly understood at the time, the tests for it were rudimentary, and most importantly, it was sweet. In small enough amounts, the effects of poisoning could be minimized while adding a noticeable amount of sweetness, body, and aroma, and if someone did suffer the effects of poisoning, it would be difficult to trace the source back to the wine. By this method, wine cellars could enhance lower quality wine to mimic Predicatswein. At the time, the chemical investigation team assumed that this was an isolated incident, limited to cheap, mass-produced wine, but as the weeks progressed, this optimistic assumption proved drastically incorrect. With this wine confiscated, investigators began searching for more wineries who may have performed similar adulteration, but as they did, a parallel incident began occurring across Austria. The bacterial colonies used in sewage treatment facilities were suddenly and inexplicably collapsing, and untreated sewage was flowing into the rivers and devastating their ecosystems. It didn't take long to discover what was causing this. Despite attempts at secrecy, knowledge of the investigations had leaked to the wine industry, and now, other wineries who had been sweetening their wine were desperately dumping it into the sewer to hide it from the investigators. However, the diethylene glycol in the wine had the effect of killing the bacterial colonies in the water treatment plants, and thereby unintentionally broadcasting their actions. Investigators were forced to scramble in order to find these wineries before they could destroy their tainted wine. After raiding a few cellars from winemakers in Burgenland, they quickly discovered that it wasn't only the cheap wine that had been affected. Both cheap and expensive winemakers were adding diethylene glycol to their wines in order to sweeten it. By this point, it was apparent that secrecy was no longer possible. On April 23, 1985, the Austrian government announced the discovery to the public and issued a health warning against Predicatswein. 2 days later, approximately 2 million liters of wine were confiscated to await laboratory testing. However, it would take some time for the laboratories, with their limited resources, to finish their tests. Over the following months, these tests would reveal just how deeply this poisoning had rooted itself in the Austrian wine industry, and how it had been exacerbated by ignorant bodies secretly performing their own actions independently. While there was little news over the next few months, those chemists tasked with testing the wine were understaffed, overworked, and woefully disorganized. In some instances, a single sample of wine was tested 100 times due to poor communication, and the number of samples had ballooned so quickly that testing all of the wine became impossible with contemporary methods, with or without proper organization. These chemists also realized that, since the government had announced their investigation, the poisoners now had the opportunity to hide their work by diluting the affected wine before it could be confiscated. And so, the chemists settled on a different plan. They would develop new methods of testing. After only 3 months of dedicated work, they were able to increase the sensitivity of the tests by 4,000%, so that 5 milligrams of diethylene glycol could be detected in 1 liter of wine. But perhaps more importantly, these tests could be completed in as little as 5 minutes, making the task of testing much more expedient. Over time, more people in the wine industry were implicated, and their wines were placed on a blacklist. With the revelation of this poisoning, doctors were finally linking illnesses to Austrian wine consumption. On July 11th, multiple cases were reported in the newspapers. One was of a 36-year-old man who had bought 50 bottles of Predikatswein to fill his cellar and decided to drink some of it. That same night, he began suffering from stomach cramps and his body began shaking. Another man drank a bottle of Predikatswein over the course of a number of evenings, until eventually he started vomiting and suffering from kidney stones. The following day, July 12th, a report was released about a family who had gathered for their 77-year-old grandmother's birthday party, and the 11 adults all shared bottles of Predikatswein. By the next day, each of them was feeling nauseated and dizzy. Another case emerged later that month, which was far more dire. 4 years before the tests for diethylene glycol began, a retired German man had been on vacation near Vienna, where he drank large amounts of sweet wine, then bought another several liters to take back home with him to Munich. During his return journey, however, he began suffering from severe kidney pain and nausea, for which he was admitted to the hospital. There, his condition worsened until finally, his liver failed completely. The doctors were able to deduce the cause of his illness: glycol poisoning, which had come from the large amount of wine he had ingested. The newspapers initially reported him as the first confirmed death of the poisoning, but this was refuted a few days later when the man provided an interview to a competing newspaper in which he dryly noted, "I am fine now," and recounted his poisoning from 4 years prior. This last report revealed a concerning fact. At first, it was believed that the usage of diethylene glycol was much smaller in scope. This event showed that wineries have been adding the chemical to their wines for over 5 years, and as laboratories continued testing, this scope only widened. The oldest bottle discovered with the chemical was bottled in 1976, meaning that this had been occurring for nearly a decade at the least. Then, on July 19th, it was revealed that a single bottle of ice wine contained 16 grams of diethylene glycol in it, enough to sicken an adult and kill someone susceptible to it. That same day, advertisements appeared in numerous newspapers internationally, purchased by the Austrian Wine Propaganda Office, who were desperate to salvage what public goodwill they could. Fritz Hallgarten, in his book Wine Scandal, translates it so: "No pardon against the black sheep of Austrian viticulture. Criminal investigations have been initiated. Already on April 23, 1985, the authorities took all precautions. All wines found to be adulterated were confiscated. Official report of the Austrian Wine Control: 52,790 Austrian growers, 1,582 Austrian wine merchants, and 52 viticultural cooperatives produce wine under the strictest official control of quality." These statements, however, were obviously hollow to the public, who had grown wary of Austrian wine as new batches were found to include diethylene glycol, and the blacklist continued to grow. As if to rebut the propaganda office, another bottle of wine was found to contain 45 grams of diethylene glycol per liter, almost 3 times as much as the ice wine, only 6 days after they released their advertisement. By the end of July, over 5 million liters of Austrian wine had been confiscated. However, German wine resellers didn't want to lose profits on their imports, and so they silently re-exported their Austrian wine to other countries who were still uninformed about the poisoning. Soon afterward, these countries placed similar bans, but only after numerous drinkers began to show symptoms of paralysis after drinking Austrian wine. In an odd quirk of linguistic barriers, Japan and China also ordered a ban on the sale of Australian wine, due to the similarity of the countries' names. In the course of testing this wine, numerous other scandals were inadvertently discovered, such as the fact that much of the wine market wasn't wine at all, but a special concoction named Kunstwein, which tastes remarkably similar to actual wine, yet contains no grapes. Supposedly, one company was making 100,000 liters of it every month. Around 1980, Kunstwein makers had begun adding diethylene glycol as well. But other scandals were of much more dire consequence, and one explained the devastating effects that some people were experiencing from the glycol. One of the known treatments for diethylene glycol poisoning is ethanol, better known as the alcohol normally found in drinks. Ethanol reacts with the same liver enzymes as diethylene glycol, and if the enzymes are occupied by the ethanol, then the glycol can pass through the liver without being transformed into the toxic diglycolic acid, whereafter it is safely expelled from the body. This meant that, ideally, the ethanol in the wine would help counteract the toxicity of the diethylene glycol, and likely did in many cases. However, the laboratories discovered that some wineries were adding more substances alongside the glycol, most prominently, sugar. Sugar has the opposite effect as ethanol, instead increasing the toxicity of the diethylene glycol and working against whatever safety the ethanol may have provided. As this was being discovered, another newfound scandal was taking place in Germany. After diethylene glycol was found in wines that had been exported, Austrian winemakers claimed that German wine distributors were the ones who must have added the chemical after importing it, despite the clear evidence to the contrary. To refute these claims, the German government tested German wines, surmising that if this adulteration was being performed by these companies, it was unlikely that they would limit it to only Austrian wines. During testing, however, something odd was discovered. Some bottles showed small amounts of diethylene glycol, much smaller than what was in Austrian wines. At first, these German wine distributors suggested that diethylene glycol could occur naturally during fermentation, or perhaps in the pesticides used on the grapes. Chemists quickly refuted these possibilities. Then they attempted to blame the Austrian wines for contaminating their tanks, but these lies were thin. Such contamination would only result in trace amounts of diethylene glycol, not the 20 to 30 milligrams that were appearing in these bottles. The reason was simple and was admitted by multiple sellers. They had secretly been mixing their German wines with Austrian wines to enhance the flavor. In the meantime, the German government blocked 10 billion liters of wine from entering the country any further. But another revelation was perhaps more concerning. Toward the end of July, it was discovered that diethylene glycol had been intentionally added to grape juice at a concentration of 1 gram per liter. While this was less than what was typically found in the affected wines, much less diethylene glycol is required to sicken children, and even if this amount wasn't enough to cause acute poisoning, ingestion over long periods of time could still cause organ and neurological damage, especially without the mitigating effects of ethanol. With vast amounts of information being revealed to the public in such a short time, the media began focusing on this wine adulteration more and more, and affected wine was given a name, antifreeze wine, after reporters somewhat inaccurately stated that the chemical being used was antifreeze. While diethylene glycol is used as such in rare cases, other chemicals are far more common for the purpose. Despite this, the name antifreeze wine became the common term. By this point, the scandal had become a major cultural event, and a polka was even created in its honor, Zum Wohl Glykol, or, in English, Cheers to Glycol. With the public enraged, they began to demand answers to 3 questions in particular. How was the government involved? How had this happened in the first place? And why? Reporters began investigating how long the government had known about this adulteration, and they noticed a discrepancy. On May 10th, the Austrian government alerted German officials that contaminated wine had been exported to their country. However, while the German government warned about drinking wine in Austria, the public wasn't informed that wine for sale in Germany had been affected, meaning that German citizens were still unwittingly buying wine with diethylene glycol. What wasn't reported was that, on May 30th, the German wine investigators were ordered to stop taking samples, suggesting that somebody in the upper echelons of the German government wanted this poisoning kept a secret. It wasn't until July 9th, almost a month and a half later, that a warning was given to the public. The reason for these strange occurrences was soon discovered. As opposed to contacting the German federal state, the Austrian investigators informed the Ministry of Viticulture in Mainz, whose chief concern was the well-being of the importers rather than public health. Hoping to salvage the wine, they kept this information secret and sought counsel to discover how much diethylene glycol would be hazardous to a person's health, and planned to approach the Minister of the Federal State for permission to issue new licenses that would allow the sale of antifreeze wine. Their plan was to discover the maximum safe amount of the chemical and allow winemakers to mix the affected wine with clean wine to reach this predetermined limit. When this was discovered, the public outcry was massive, and many demanded the resignation of those attempting to allow the sale of the antifreeze wine. 1 month after this revelation, one of the 3 people involved resigned, and the other 2 were transferred to other ministries. But investigators had a more pressing concern: the discovery of how this had happened. The first step was determining likely perpetrators. Using diethylene glycol as an additive seemed almost insidiously genius. Not only did it enhance the flavor profile of the wine in profound ways, but it was also incredibly cheap and could be bought in bulk. What's more, detection had been difficult and time-consuming before the chemist's improvements, making it unlikely to be discovered, especially with the Austrian wine control so overwhelmed. The investigators reasoned that whoever had first conceived of this likely had some sort of background in chemistry. Working off of this assumption, they discovered their prime suspect, a man named Otto Nadrasky. Nadrasky had spent time as a chemist and had later gone on to become a wine consultant for numerous large wine companies. He was promptly arrested, alongside dozens of others. Though many of these people had to be let go due to a lack of evidence, enough were detained that, as court hearings proceeded, the greater reasoning behind the scandal was made clear. During the 1970s, the climate of Austria was changing. Rain had become more frequent, and temperatures were gradually rising, which had an effect on the grapes. As mentioned before, farmers wanted to leave grapes on the vine for as long as possible so that they could ripen and sweeten, but the extra rain was making the grapes plump up and fall off of the vine long before the end of the season, resulting in crops that were significantly more sour. In spite of this, production companies still had orders to fill. Many exporters had signed contracts with German importers for large quantities of sweet wine. A solution would have to be found, and so Otto Nadrasky got to work. As a chemist, he had stumbled upon the idea of using diethylene glycol as an additive, and so he experimented to find the correct balance so that the taste could be enhanced while avoiding detection. To aid this endeavor, he also added other chemicals that helped hide its presence and further enhance the taste of the wine. What's more, he discovered that diethylene glycol could hide the presence of added water, which would allow companies to dilute the wine and further increase their yield. Once he had ascertained the proper mixture, he handed the formula to the companies for whom he worked. From there, they sold their secret to other companies, and over the years, more and more wine producers began using this idea until approximately 15% of all Austrian wines had some amount of diethylene glycol in it. Some companies tweaked the formula to add even more glycol. This flippant usage of the chemical may have been due to a misunderstanding. While mass poisonings had occurred in other...
This is what they did to all illegal street drugs. And they poisoned all of America. Most of us are sick and crazy because of it. And so yeah, we learned from this. We learned from the Austrian wine poisoning. We took it to the streets and we let all the dealers cut all the dope with garbage and all this. And so then now all the Oblivion NPCs are walking all around the streets and talking to themselves and all this. And it's because, you know, they mass poisoned us.
Countries before, the toxicity of diethylene glycol was poorly understood, and in court, multiple wine merchants professed that they had researched diethylene glycol before using it and found no literature to suggest that it was poisonous. Therefore, they felt morally confident adding it to their wine, despite the inherent duplicity. When
It's
inspectors
poison,
learned of
you
this trick,
idiot.
producers
It's
frantically
glycerin.
tried to hide their affected wine. The federal government had stated the names of the two companies that had initially been discovered using glycol, which gave their suppliers time to hide or destroy their wine. Some, as mentioned previously, had dumped theirs into the sewer, but when this only broadcast their usage to the authorities, others realized that something else would have to be done. Wineries began to run their own tests in order to discover whether the equipment could detect the amount of glycol that they were using, hiding the results in neighboring businesses in case they were raided. By their calculations, they would need to dilute the affected wine with 10 parts unaffected wine in order to avoid detection, but this immediately became a problem. None of the wineries had that much unadulterated wine, and there was no way for them to know what other companies had added glycol to their product. If they bought from another winery, they risked making their...
And then they all realize that they're all stepping on each other's stepped on garbage, and that there's no dope or alcohol left in it. It's it's the old big pharma problem.
wines even more toxic, and having even more antifreeze wine in their possession. In the end, this proved pointless as the chemists devised their new methods of detection, and many of the culpable parties were arrested. Though court proceedings would take another 12 years, the scandal itself was finally over. But in the meantime, the rest of the wine industry was left to salvage what they could of their livelihoods.
Finally, nice half-an-hour load. Piece of shit company.
Even as countries
Piece of
lifted
shit
their bans
developer.
on Austrian wine, consumer trust had been hopelessly destroyed. The government rushed new and stringent laws through legislation to ensure the safety of the wine and salvage the market, and one economist famously stated that everything would be resolved and forgotten in a year. His optimistic assessment was almost comically wrong. Within weeks of the media coverage, wine merchants were declaring bankruptcy. Even those companies who hadn't participated in the scandal were stigmatized, and Austrian wine was shunned internationally. Of note was that no wine growers had been implicated in the scandal, only fermenters and merchants, and yet many vineyards were forced to close permanently as the Austrian wine economy staggered and they could no longer sell their grapes, especially the lower quality ones. Those merchants who had participated, however, were indignant, and one defense lawyer blamed consumers for buying cheap wine without more careful consideration. These defenses proved ineffective, and many were given the maximum 10-year sentence. In the end, Austrian wine exports were down to less than 5% of where they had been only 1 year prior. Despite this, some of the companies at the center of the scandal managed to avoid bankruptcy. According to official records, nobody had been injured by the glycol, but this seems unlikely given the scope of the poisoning. In the meantime, the Austrian government was now left with the daunting task of destroying 270 million liters of contaminated wine, and their answer came from surprising sources.
So then they all end up dumping and burning like 500,000 pounds of meth or whatever the fuck. You know, or weed, or dumping, like, you know, a ton of liquor into the fucking lake nearby and shit like this. And you're like, what? All that good product, because you guys have to cut everything with garbage. It's like your corruption has forced you into the life of a poisoner.
Power plant and a cement plant. In 1987, it was announced that technicians from the Österreichischen Traukraftwerke in Carinthia had devised a method for burning the wine to produce electricity. Similarly, a cement plant had retrofitted their furnaces to permit the use of wine as a coolant, and in this manner, all of the wine was gradually destroyed. With the poisoning concluded, the country set about rebuilding their industry. Winemakers began a campaign to resist the harsh new quality control laws enacted by the government, arguing that the scandal wasn't caused by weak laws, but rather by a lack of enforcement. After they couldn't come to an agreement with lawmakers, multiple irate farmers threw salads at Günther Hayden, the agriculture minister. Still, the wine laws held. While the export
Okay,
market
you
had
switched
been
my
attacked,
weapons on
the
me.
domestic
Why?
market had survived. with sales
You
somewhat
fucking
to
switched my weapons on me.
94%
Why?
compared to the previous year.
God
This
damn
was
it, now I gotta
largely
die
the
because you
dedicated
fucking
buyers
suck
of
dick at
particular
keeping my
wineries,
weapons on me, I
still
guess?
driving
You
to
suck
it.
dick at having me
With the
equip the
image of
weapons
sweet
I had
wine
equipped?
painted, wineries focused
Fucking
on
piece of
cultivating
shit
grapes to make
developer.
dry white wines, while wineries worked on reviving old, traditional Austrian methods of production. Those winemakers who survived the scandal began taking even greater pride in their product, focusing on improving the quality as opposed to the quantity. This was encouraged by new wine colleges established across Austria with the express purpose of educating aspiring vintners. These colleges were tasked with educating and guiding a new generation of winemakers and merchants who embraced a wide variety of new ideas, adapting quickly to the changing tastes of consumers and enacting more sustainable growing practices, leading to the long-term positive health of wineries. For example, some new wine growers used a practice called Traubenausdünnung, where they would remove 50 to 70% of the grapes from the vine so that the remaining ones would receive more of the plant's nutrients and energy. While this resulted in less wine overall and was labor-intensive, the resulting product was of notably higher quality. The scandal had also encouraged consumers to be more conscious of their purchases, and they began to take a greater interest in both the production process and the quality of the wine they were drinking, which in turn demanded a greater knowledge from producers and merchants. With time, and with the new winery practices, drinkers began to buy wine in greater amounts once again. This was bolstered by the confidence instilled by the new, stringent government policies. Every new bottle would be tested for composition and quality, and would be marked as approved with an excise stamp that included an identification number and date of inspection. It would be 16 years before the export market reached the levels of profit they once had, but by the time they did, their reputation had been radically altered. Though the modern Austrian wine market is much smaller than those of other countries such as Italy and France, they are renowned for their quality, and they are instantly recognizable thanks to the newly designed, distinctive red-white-red excise stamp on top of every bottle that signifies it as approved for export by the federal government, after both chemical tests and a taste test. Inadvertently, the stamps had become a marketing tool. Today, the wine scandal is seemingly forgotten, replaced by modern acknowledgement of the universally high Austrian quality and enforced by what are often agreed to be the strictest wine laws in the world. Some winemakers still grumble about the brash stupidity of the old wine merchants who added diethylene glycol to their wine, but all will agree that, if the poisoning had never happened, Austrian wine would be drastically different, and most seem thankful for the prosperity that the modern wine industry is enjoying, with no need for added glycol.
Yeah, please don't poison the dope in the liquor. You planted so much poison already. We really don't need it. Please let it be pure. Your corruption has killed us. It's leaked into the drugs we use, even. Oh, get out, get out, 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 out. Ugh. Please. Please end this. Oh, thank God. You're so annoying. Stop. let's finish the horror of the Bass Pro Pyramid.
On were Omni's Co., a small LA design company that put essentially
Thank you, Frederick
every resource
Nudison,
they had,
of liking
as
to
well
sub to your
as
channel.
hiring new contractors into stripping back Jared's plan into one that fell within Schlenker's budget. Throughout the process, Omni's Co. shifted the plan even further into the Egyptian theme over the Memphis music theme, which would have major consequences for Schlenker later. As a result of putting everything they had into this, Omni's Co. was falling apart.
Oops. What'd you do? No, what'd you do?
Now that it is happening. Gripship. Shortly after, $60,000 was sent to Omnis that helped them keep chugging along for a little longer. Despite the crisis going on behind the scenes, the mayors were mostly kept in the dark about the turmoil. They were really only seeing the funding Schlenker had secured and hearing the big talk about all the great things that were planned to come. However, this facade was ripped away rather abruptly. The pyramid companies had managed to secure a $3 million loan from the National Bank of Commerce, but this loan required the mayor's signature on the paper to finalize it. That way, if the pyramid went tits up and couldn't pay the loan back, the bank could legally choke the money they were owed out of the Memphis taxpayer. On May 11th, 1990, when Mayor Hackett and Mayor Morris were living it up at a barbecue festival, they were completely blindsided when Tigrick's lawyer, Marshall Chris, materialized out of nowhere. He just came through with no warning and asked them to sign the loan on the spot. The move came off extremely desperate to the mayors. As Libby Graham put it, the company that made ever more brazen promises that chased $55 million in loans needed a last-minute loan to pay its bills, and it needed the city and county's help to get it, all of which made it seem more likely that the Pyramid Project was going to die with its toes in its mouth, and the city of Memphis was going to be on the hook for the bill. Morris supposedly threw a shit fit, haranguing over the gall it took to ask for something like this out of the blue, but in the end, both he and Mayor Hackett ended up siding, but not without a bad taste left in their mouth. Had a distinct hint of paprika and tumor. But despite these ups and downs and the pyramid seemingly hanging by a thread throughout its development, it seemed like things were slowly coming together. Even though it took going through hell, Omni's Co. had successfully trimmed millions of dollars of fat off Jared's original plans, bringing it within budget.
Why did you change my weapons?
Stuff like ad deals and pension funds, like teachers' insurance and annuity. They had agreed to give permanent financing upon the pyramid's completion, which was a big win. And even after repeated failures to secure the main chunk of private funding, Schlenker got in touch with French lender SocGen, where talks got far enough that SocGen hired an engineering firm to evaluate the pyramid's cost and feasibility. These relative wins gave Hackett and Morris hopium that the deal still might get completed as planned, pulling them back from the edge. However, soon another straw landed on the camel's back, and for some, it's the one that broke it. In October 1990, John Tigrick was rushed to the hospital while suffering from bleeding ulcers, those leaky little things. Tigrick genuinely feared that the cot he laid in might be his deathbed, so as a last wish, he recorded a message to Schlenker, requesting that he bring his son, Isaac Tigrick, back to work on the pyramid. While Schlenker might not have straight up disliked Isaac, he always thought he was a weirdo, but since this request may have truly been John Tigrick's dying wish, a man Schlenker had come to genuinely respect, he sent Isaac a letter saying he would be happy to have him back on board. In the early days of the pyramid, before even Schlenker was involved, Isaac was the one initially designing the
In the early days of the pyramid.
Isaac had a very particular vision of what
fucking pyramid
the theme would be, and he was not a fan of the heavy Egyptian emphasis the project had taken on. He always wanted it to be more centered around music and its history in Memphis. Isaac redesigned the attractions again to be more in line with his vision and had a strong backer in his pops, who, surprise, didn't die, and who was also a proponent of that heavier music theming that Isaac was championing. As far as Schlenker was concerned, these changes were a non-starter. They were going to cost too much to implement at a time when banks were even more nervous than usual to give out loans, and the pyramid was already struggling to get financing. On December 22nd, 1990, Schlenker went to John's penthouse one more time and essentially told him that Isaac's changes were not feasible. Schlenker asked for Isaac to be taken off the project and said that additions could be made later, but at least for now, they had to move forward with Omni's Co.'s plan. John took it well and blew a fucking gasket. He was already mauling at the spending habits of the pyramid companies, and to him, making a request like this was just too damn far. After that conversation, despite being the one who first brought him on the project, John Tigrick now wanted Sidney Schlenker completely removed from managerial duties on the pyramid. A few weeks into 1991, Tigrick sent Schlenker a letter suggesting that he give up control of day-to-day
Street Fighter
operations.
2.
This is when
I love how he literally dictated the year by what video game was the most popular, and it is a really good way to understand what year it was.
plan. John took it well and blew a fucking gasket. He was already mauling at the spending habits of the pyramid companies, and to him, making a request like this was just
spending
too
habits
damn
of the
far.
pyramid
After that conversation,
companies.
despite being the one who first brought him on the project, John Tigrit now wanted Sidney Schlenker completely removed from managerial duties on the pyramid. A few weeks into 1991...
Yeah, 1991. A few weeks into 1991. Yep, I remember I was like maybe, you know, about 10 years old or something. And, yeah, and we were playing Super Nintendo on a rental Super Nintendo because you couldn't afford them. And, you know, or I mean, you could afford them, but I mean, they were expensive. And at $129.99 Super Nintendo, I had to work all summer for 2 years to be able to afford one. I mean, that was a lot of money back then. $129.99 for a brand new console. That was before the corruption of the world killed us all.
Tigrit sent Schlenker a letter suggesting that he give up control of day-to-day operations. This is when the feud got messier and started dragging in more and more people. Tigrit
raised all the prices 5 times what they should be.
Become the new CEO, that Schlenker become the chairman of the pyramid companies, and that Tigrit and Schlenker each give Dean 2.5% of what they'd invested, essentially giving Bonham a swing vote in decision-making. This was a problem for Schlenker. Dean Bonham was actually a business partner of his back in Denver, and Sidney was the one who asked Dean to come with him to Memphis. But despite their familiarity, Schlenker knew he and Bonham had a rocky past and feared that Dean had switched allegiances and was now trying to steal this deal from out under him. In Schlenker's response to Tigrit, he agreed to let Bonham become CEO, but refused to give him any stock, as he was shit scared of...
When these people get around money, their logic and their decency goes flying. First thing go flying out the window, and they sell their own grandmother to get it. You know,
potentially giving majority control of the pyramid to John Tigrit. Like John usually does when he gets rejected, he started mauling even harder. It got worse when Schlenker sent a counteroffer saying he would step down if Tigrit paid Schlenker a $250,000 personal investment and relieved Schlenker responsibility for over $1 million in pyramid-related debts. Like he did with
pyramid-related debts.
Tigrit viewed this as ransom, and shit just kept getting uglier. This was compounded when rumors from Schlenker's personal life involving an affair with an ex-wife surfaced, as well as an alleged hit with, all of which Tigrit was completely unaware of. Schlenker and Tigrit were essentially no longer on speaking terms, and the mayors, Morris and Hackett, were hearing from them both more and more. Tigrit would call to shit all over Schlenker, and then Schlenker would call back to defend himself, and back and forth, back and forth. It was rumored that slowly Morris became something of a Tigrit stan, and Mayor Hackett became a Schlenker meat rider, but both were advised not to get in the middle of it. After some time, though, the mayors stopped caring about the squabble and were more scared that the deal was in jeopardy, and that failure could kill their political careers. So they basically told Tigrit and Schlenker to suck it up and get the shit done already. Reportedly, Sidney Schlenker got the news while in the hospital, but still took the ultimatum rather well, whereas John Tigrit exploded again and called the mayors liver-lilied sons of bitches. The writing was on the wall, and the mayors were forced to pick a side, at which point they deemed Schlenker as too much of a risk to stand by. To the public, the first signs of just how poorly things were going was Dean Bonham's departure from the project. His company had sold $44 million worth of sponsorships and was owed $4.4 million in commission. Despite being owed this much, they still chose to pay it. There was no shutting the floodgates after that. Bonham blamed Schlenker's management as the root cause of the pyramid's problems, but in contrast with Bonham, John Tigrit's former personal lawyer, Marshall Chris, had worked at the pyramid and answered directly to Schlenker for some time now, and he seemingly switched loyalties to Schlenker. He told Tigrit that he could no longer approve of his actions. This was a problem for John Tigrit, as Chris had access to many of his personal dealings, being his former lawyer, and accused Chris of leaking this personal information to Schlenker, something that Chris firmly denied. It's very debated over whose fault it is that the pyramid as it was originally envisioned fell apart, but at the time, the walls were closing in on Schlenker, as everything seemed to fall apart for him. Even his controversial personal life landed on the front page of the newspapers. Every loan that Schlenker tried to make happen fell through. Fuji, a Japanese lender, thought the pyramid might never get built. The National Bank of Australia almost committed, but it required the city to sign off on a loan again, which the mayors refused to do during an election year, and especially after all the frivolous spending beforehand. Even SocGen, who had already hired that engineering firm to evaluate the pyramid, ended up pulling out of the project when they received an anonymous letter written in French. It was addressed as coming from Memphis and essentially said that Schlenker killed everything he touched. Schlenker's already poo-stained reputation reputation just kept getting smellier, and these repeated public failures made banks want even less to do with him. In one of his most desperate attempts, Schlenker thought he had secured an $80 million loan from a lender in Las Vegas, only for it to be a complete scam, coming from somebody that the Nevada authorities consider to be a well-known con man. Getting closer and closer to the day the pyramid was to open, the arena wasn't even ready for basketball yet, and Schlenker had long been unable to rely on Tigrit for any further funding. In 1991, Memphis Magazine crowned Schlenker on its cover as Memphian of the Year. On June 17, 1991, the government terminated its contract with Schlenker and Tigrit. The July after, under court order, Sidney Schlenker was disallowed from going inside the finished pyramid he spent the last 3 years of his life attempting to mastermind. And on July 23, 1991, the pyramid companies filed for bankruptcy with $16 million in debts. That November, when the pyramid finally opened to the public, it was a far cry from everything it had been built in Memphians' minds to be.
Memphians.
The day the pyramid opened in full was much less of a spectacle.
We're all gonna be guys from Egypt, guys. We're all gonna be guys from Egypt, guys. It's all gonna be some kind of Egyptian fantasy, guys. We'll all butt fuck each other while we dress up like Cleopatra and Mark Antony, and we'll butt fuck each other in the pyramid. And we're all gonna be Cleopatra and Mark Antony in the pyramids, guys, in Memphis.
Compared to the Big Dig, the mood was suitably less hopeful.
Your corruption has killed the world.
As the only part of the venue actually completed was the 20,000-seat arena. It lacked any and all of the amenities the people of Memphis had been promised and had their tax dollars railgunned at for years. Amenities that were much of the motivation for seeing the struggling project through in the first place. The Pyramid's first event was on November 9th, 1991. It was a concert performance from the Judds, a mom and daughter country singer pair. Not to be confused with the Stubbs, which is all that's left after I cut my toes off. While the arena wasn't packed out like Teens and Drake's Phone, the first night was a relative success, with 15,000 people showing up, and folks came away from that performance with good memories of their time there. Also on the first night, the bathrooms overflowed and flooded the basement with sewer water. It got bad enough that workers had to crank some 90s and quickly smack down Smash Bros. Sandbags around the stage so the electronics under it didn't get moist and wet and soggy. Joe Sills from Forbes called the flooding Tigrit's Retribution, and Jake Moore, a man who worked at the pyramid on that first night and for decades after, told Commercial Appeal, "I saw water bubbling up. What happened was all those people got here early. It's the first event and everyone's waiting so they can be in there first. So what did everyone do as they got in? They all rushed to the bathrooms. Basically a bladder-motivated flash mob. It was a big brown start for the pyramid's legacy. But was it just a stand?
Oh, no.
Basement with sewer water. It got bad enough that Judds, a mom and daughter country singer pair. Not to be confused with the Stubbs, which is all that's left after I cut my toes off. While the arena wasn't packed out like Teens and Drake's Phone, the first night was a relative success, with 15,000 people showing up, and folks came away from that performance with good memories of their time there. Also on the first night, the bathrooms overflowed and
the bathrooms backed up and began flooding the arena. Workers had to sandbag the perimeter to protect the electrical work under the stage. I mean, will sandbags stop sewage? I don't think so. I think you just have sandbags that smell like shit. And that's the first day. Oh, good. That was the first day. It was a massive, terrible sewage disaster. First day? Great. I hope it just gets better from there. Hopefully there's like an earthquake and a 5-alarm fire and a fucking train crash into the side of the fucking pyramid, and maybe that cock ring falls off. And
got bad enough that workers had to crank some 90s and quickly smack down Smash Bros. Sandbags around the stage so the electronics under it didn't get moist and wet and soggy. Joe Sills from Forbes called the flooding Tigrit's Retribution, and Jake Moore...
Tigrit's Retribution?
Soggy. Joe Sills from Forbes called the flooding Tigrit's Retribution.
Tigrit's Retribution. Uh-oh. What are you doing? Stop that. No, just get down on the ground so I can smash you. No, just, god damn it, you're constantly grit all the time. You're so annoying. I've got to change this rapier spec. Oh, that's it right there? Read the Book of Isabella.
And Jake Moore, a man who worked at the pyramid on that first night and for decades after, told Commercial Appeal, I saw water bubbling up. What happened was all those people got here early. It's the first event and everyone's waiting so they can be in there first. So what did everyone do as they got in? They all rushed to the bathrooms. Basically a bladder-motivated flash mob. It was a big brown start for the pyramid's legacy. But was it just a stain on its reputation or the color of the whole painting? Well, who's to say? The pyramid primarily served as the Memphis State Tigers' home court for college basketball, a mainstay of not just the pyramid's early years, but also Memphis as a city. The pyramid hosted several major NCAA tournaments.
Oh my fucking god, the pyramid is a fucking basketball court? Why? It's a Bass Pro Shop.
Both for women's and men's basketball, acting as the Tigers' home turf for a total of 12 seasons. A plethora.
Oh, so the pyramid itself is just like a sporting arena. I thought it was actually a fucking Bass Pro Shop.
Of now brand name talent.
No, it is. It's a Bass Pro Shop now.
That court. The likes of Kobe, Michael Jordan, and Memphis's own.
Who was the Nuggets guy? It was LeBron James. I think we had LeBron James and traded him.
Penny Hardaway scuffed their shoes on the pyramid's floor during their pre-millionaire years. The pyramid was a unique venue.
I think he was with the Nuggets for a couple of years.
For any sport, but basketball got the biggest taste of the experience. The building
was LeBron James on the Nuggets. I can't remember. No, he was Lakers, was he? I thought he was Nuggets. No. I don't remember. And then he lost. He's like, they don't have it, and then he lost.
The building was intensely angular on account of being a pyramid. It had seats that were notoriously narrow, almost vertically inclined, and that made a pregnant woman fall over once. Many folk would go on to describe the arena's seating as dog shit. The roof extended...
It's dog shit. It was terrible. Yeah, that thing's probably so small that, like, when you, like, put seating in it, it was probably all tightly compacted, right? That thing looks small when you consider it as a sports arena, you know? It looks small to me.
Higher than most stadiums ever, meeting at an apex that almost bared down on you. All of this together created a daunting sight if you stood on the court and looked up. Amongst players, the pyramid earned the nickname the Tomb of Doom because of the little Looney Tunes gulp it makes you do when you look up. Penny Hardaway recalled his time playing for the Memphis State Tigers and what the venue was like, telling Forbes, as a basketball arena, the pyramid was out of this world. It wasn't natural. It wasn't normal. It was loud because of how the sound went to a point in the top of the arena. We had a humongous home court advantage.
We had a huge, humongous home court advantage. It was loud.
While the crowd's cheers, being loud as hell, gave the Tigers a leg up with an intimidation factor, it kind of pooed all over the pyramid's other main use case, hosting concerts. The acoustics in the arena were straight up ass. It echoed like the caverns of your empty heart, and the noise bounced back down onto those below. It turns out the pyramid is just a really lousy shape for a musical performance. At the time, the running joke was, you get 2 concerts for the price of 1. The concert on stage and the echo of the concert bouncing off the roof right back at you. The sonics were so bad, Mephiles the Dark had to kill the guy. The city of Memphis sued the contractor responsible for the design because they screwed the pooch that bad. To put a band-aid on a bullet wound, they added sound-absorbing strips later on. I imagine it was about as effective as a rookie YouTuber putting soundproof phone behind them and no one else in their room. Guilty as charged. Cover your corners, guys. But despite all these issues, the Pyramid was still a gigantic 20,000-person arena with a form factor unlike any other. And at the time, it was the biggest venue available in Memphis, a city with a deeply rooted and passionate music culture. This Pyramid was still able to attract tons of huge names to perform there. It hosted superstar acts from across genres like Metallica, Billy Joel, Prince, Lil Wayne, NSYNC with Diddy for some reason. Billy Joel again, but this time also with Elton John. But my personal favorite was Fish, who played a sold-out concert at the Pyramid in 1999. To me, them playing a packed-out show there over 2 decades ago was an omen of what was to come. In 2022, Fish the band released a live recording of that concert called Memphis 99, in what to me is a full-circle moment. Fish was at the Pyramid before the Pyramid was Fish, and now that it is Fish, Fish the band remembers the Pyramid before it was Fish.
Yes, it's fucking beautiful. I love it. It's the internet logic. It's the Pepe Silvio of this stupid-ass horror of the Bass Pro Pyramid theory.
I've lost 6.5 pints of blood today. Concerts in college basketball.
Fish.
Were the events
Fish before fish, yeah.
Most often seen at the Pyramid, but a whole lot of stuff happened a lot less often in those hallowed halls. Sometimes
this guy's funny and he's on point.
The then World Wrestling
he's like on point with it. He deserves it. He'll be big. Yeah, he's on point with it. I bet he gets really big. Because he's fucking funny.
St. Valentine's Day Massacre In Your House pay-per-view event at the Pyramid. It was the last event to use In Your House in its title scheme, which I really appreciate because I hated saying that sentence. I don't watch much professional wrestling, but from what I've read, the fight card was a very resounding mid. It apparently had some weak opening matches with a solid main event slate that sorta kinda made up for it. Also in 1999, the almost 250-year-old Bolshoi Ballet, founded the same year Americans told King George to start rope maxing, performed in Memphis at the Pyramid with an 11-piece chamber orchestra. To some, like a critic at the Commercial Appeal, it was a weirdly high-profile act to host at the Pyramid, a venue that many considered to be a complete gimmick of a building. Some people just thought the venue wasn't really suited for the finer arts, with people at the ballet performance carrying concessions back to the stands like it was just another game of college basketball, which, to be clear, is fine art. From 2002 to 2006, the Church of God in Christ held their yearly Holy Convocation events at the Pyramid. People would come from across the country to see the proceedings that happened in this big old thing. And gosh darn, do these people know how to do it big. This is the only part of the video I'm not going to use the Lord's name in vain. Listening to these gospel choirs got me stank-facing and thinking of Kenny Beats samples. In 2004, as a part of Wonders, the Memphis International series, the Pyramid hosted several paintings, sculptures, personal effects, and more for legendary turtles like Leonardo da Vinci, Donatello, Michelangelo, and other prolific artists funded in the 14 to 1700s by the Medici family. Other entries in Memphis's Wonders series featured artifacts that would go on to tour all across America. But for whatever reason, these specific priceless artifacts that were gathered from private collections across the globe, some dug out from the vaults of the Vatican, were only ever showcased in North America once, in the building that would one day become the Bass Pro Pyramid. The Pyramid today is a much cooler display of culture if you ask anyone with correct opinions. It wasn't strictly as a venue, but in 2005, director Craig Brewer used the Pyramid as a forward operating base for casting his movie Black Snake Moan. Some 1,400 chumps lined up outside this tourist...
Oh my god. They had an open casting call for Black Snake Moan. But I mean, you knew that Samuel Jackson was going to come in, but did you not know who the girl was going to be or what?
Inspired arena to be in a movie that starred the likes of Sam Jackson and Christina Ricci.
Christina Ricci.
The Pyramid was also used as a soundstage during the film's production, with sets being completed on-site at the arena. I'm not sure when, but supposedly the Pyramid hosted the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers in subcapacity. I have no idea in what way, and I can't find anything concrete, but one source said it, and I want to believe
the actors of the television show probably showed up in full regalia for a fucking, you know, like a meet and greet.
Power Rangers are real.
I mean, we were really into the Power Rangers. We would have paid for anything we could get.
This next chunk might be my favorite part of this entire
Go Power Rangers.
video. The part
I don't know why we like that stupid ass show so much, but I did. I like that stupid show so much. It was a stupid show. Like half the time, the kids were like smart alecky, sort of like kind of like, I don't know. They were like, I don't know. They were like kind of California-y. It kind of rad and in your face, you know. And then the other half of it was some of the best like kung fu I had ever seen, and like cool choreographed monster fighting and stuff. For like a kids show, it had like the best choreographed fighting I'd seen, really. And the effects were kind of cool, and the giant robots were really cool.
I was most excited.
Whenever they hit each other, smoke and cool sparks would fly and stuff, and like, I actually really liked that show, but it was a crappy show. It was also the most formulaic show ever made. It was worse than Pokemon. Pokemon is like the same exact episode over and over and over again, with maybe about 4 different villains swapped in and out, you know? But overall, like, you know, but I swear to God, Mighty Morphin Power Rangers was like I could literally, like, sometimes when I was young, I would like literally like recite the show, because it always had the same exact pacing. And then I remember calling my friend and being like, dude, they finally lost the fight. You have to watch the Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. They lost the fight today. And he was like, no. And it was a 2-parter. They got their asses beat by every mob in the game, pretty much. They got their asses beat. And I loved it. It was my favorite episode of their whole run. They had this 2-parter where the girl gets kidnapped and all 4 boys get their asses beat, and like the main dude like takes over their headquarters, and I realized that I had outgrown the show, and I kind of hated Mighty Morphin Power Rangers. I kind of hated it at that point, because it was like watching Inuyasha over and over and over again. It was the exact same fucking thing every single fucking week in, week out. It was the exact same show with the exact same fighting and the exact same stuff. Exact same words, exact same phrases, exact same timing, same one-liners, same, you know, same fights, same places, same sets, same everything. It's the most one and the same show I've ever seen. But it's weird, the fighting was good. You know, it's weird. When you think fighting, you think, oh, there couldn't be anything formulaic about fighting. But it was like formulaic fighting, even, you know? And by the end of it, when they finally showed in season 3, I think it only made it like 3 seasons before it was canceled. But like in season 3, the director, I think, hated these spunky kids who constantly win all the time. That's all they do. They constantly fucking win. Right? You could tell the director, like me, was just sick of them winning the same formulaic like 21-minute fucking thing every week for years on end. I was like, something has to happen. And so he finally did. He just gave in to the dark side, and he let all the bad guys in the entire television show win. And I always thought that was a very formative moment for me, where I was like, yeah, it was a lot more entertaining when the bad guys won than these piece of shit pissant kids winning every single week like goobers over and over and over and over again. It was so boring.
To put together.
And by the end of it, like by the end of that weird like psychological episode, or whatever you want to call it, like that weird psychological like experiment that that showrunner ran, I was like cheering for Croc on Batman the Animated Series, and I was like cheering for the Riddler, and I was like, fuck Batman. And you know, I was like, by the end of it, I was like, Jesus Christ, after watching every single Disney television show for years, after watching every single Nickelodeon television show for years, I kind of got like sick of everybody always having a happy ending over and over and over again, the same formulaic fucking shitty, you know, almost BoJack Horseman fucking endings, like sitcom ending. I got sick of it, years of it. It was like 15 years. I thought I could escape back to the 50s and the 60s and the 70s on Nick at Night and get away from it, and I did. I did get away from it for a bit. I got into like Get Smart and Dobie Gillis and fucking Dragnet and, and all these other fucking adult shows and stuff. But by the end of that, I still was like, yeah, but I'm a kid and I want to see like robots fight fucking Pokemon characters, you know? That's what I actually want to see, you know? And after a while, by the time I was like 15, I hated my own tastes. I thought that liking grunge was stupid because all the singers were dead. All of them. Like, almost all of them were dead. Like, I was such a grunge fanatic, but I kind of still hate grunge. I can't really put it on anymore. I can't really listen to Kurt Cobain anymore, and that's like my favorite singer, basically. Is because I just hate grunge. It's depressed. It's sad. It's maudlin. It's blues, but the worst side of blues, where it's like, you know, she done broke up with me last night and I spent the night drunk in the swamp or something. The dark side of blues that the dark side of Lead Belly blues that didn't have like the harmony to it. It was howling, you know. And I love grunge. It's deep in my soul. I was a grunge singer and a punk singer and all this, but I don't ever want to hear grunge again. I don't ever want formulaic fucking television shows ever again. I can't stand these movies most of the time. Like most of the modern music sucks to me, and it just sounds like the same old verse, stanza, verse, stanza, verse, stanza, verse. It's the same old stanza, verse, over and over and over and over again. And I get kind of sick of it. It's the same old fucking, like, earworms that Vedic people, you know, so not Vedic people, but, like, you know, like Hindu people came up with, like, 1,000,000 years ago on sitars. And we've been hearing this pop hook on the Britney song for like 1 billion years, but we don't know it. And so we're addicted to this earworm, and we want to hear it again. I'm kind of sick of earworms. You know, I'm sick of most of the things that I liked when I was a kid. You know, I dislike that, but it's true. Something about it. I don't like the Ghostbusters anymore like I used to. I don't like the TMNT like I used to. I don't like the video game characters like I used to. I don't worship Cloud like I used to. I don't care about Squall anymore. I don't care about fucking all these weird iconic characters and stuff. I can't do hero worship anymore. My hero worship is the people in my personal life that survived the death of the cold. You know? My biggest hero is my best friend because of what she's lived through. And and I look at these like fake struggles like in television shows. I don't find much value in it. I look at the value of a television show now is like, how fast will it put me to sleep? You know, which sucks. And occasionally I get my mind blown and there's something good, you know, but most of the time I'm like, reminds me of a joke that they told on The Office, you know? Like, modern media for me is not exciting. It doesn't raise the hackles and give me, like the last time the music gave me goosebumps was, like, Billie Eilish. And before that, it was, like, fucking, 21 Pilots or, one of those. And, like, before that, it was, like, Soundgarden, you know? Been a long time. Tool. And I don't know. It's like I don't like the music that I grew up with anymore. One of the things I noticed is that my music tastes are all from the last 10 years. And I would say that was when music got bad. I would say all my taste is from stuff that was, like, from 2013 or later. And that's when music got bad. I swear to God, it's like right to the year when music got really like genuinely bad. It's weird because all of my taste comes from stuff in the last 10 years. It's like really weird. Because, I mean, I should technically be just listening to my grunge, you know? Like, I'm really envious of people that can sit there and still listen to, like, you know, Iron Maiden or Metallica or, I mean, I can't do the schlock anymore. I can't do modern music. It drives me fucking crazy. I'd rather at this point hear, like, you know, the other day I put on I think I ended the set with the Everly Brothers, just because it doesn't sound based and stupid and tribal to me. It just sounds like somebody singing to some girl that they love, and that innocence is like gone. It's like gone. We used to still have a hint of it, like with like Taylor Swift and stuff like Blank Space, you know. But now, even that era's gone. There's not like any melody on the fucking radio. It's a bunch of chop and screw that fucking sucks, you know. And and it's $300 to go to a show, so you can't be saved by the live scene anymore. Like, I've been saved by the live scene a bunch of times, but I mean, I can't, not anymore. I don't look for resurrection or safety or the future in the live scene, because I know that they're charging $300 a ticket and all the incidental fees in between. And it's like their corruption, their idea of sitting on this money, you know, I don't know what caused this, and I don't want to point fingers.
Be warned, it is.
It's a stupid streamer thing to be like, shake the stick, what's going on here, but you know, and what was the phrase? It's like, you're like constantly looking for some kind of hill to die on, you know, and I don't like doing that anymore.
It's about a boxing match where some
I do it a lot still.
Sustained in this regulated and controlled environment.
But I try to avoid making moral stands anymore, because I just don't even think that we have a morality anymore.
I do get shot.
You know, I try not to look down on people anymore, because it's like, at this point,
my personal
I think all of humanity has been